My name's Mark, I'm 23 years old, and last month was supposed to be one of the proudest days of my life. After years of staying up late, juggling part-time jobs, and constantly proving to myself that I could actually make it, I finally walked across the stage to receive my college diploma. I had pictured this moment since I was a kid, the crowd clapping, my family cheering loudly, maybe my mom crying into a tissue like she always does at the smallest milestones. Instead, when I looked out into the sea of parents, grandparents, and siblings waving and snapping photos, the entire row of seats reserved for my family stayed empty. Not one of them showed. The night before graduation, my dad had texted into the family group chat reminding everyone to be on time because he'd reserved front row seats. That's what stuck with me. He reminded everyone else. Me? I didn't need reminding. I had been holding on to this day like oxygen. So when the announcer called my name and I walked across the stage, I tried to convince myself maybe they were running late, maybe traffic, maybe something reasonable. But as the ceremony ended and I clutched the diploma I'd worked so hard for, I finally unlocked my phone to see a single text from my mom in the group chat. Sorry, Mark. It's your brother's birthday today. We'll celebrate you another time. My brother, Matt, turned 18 that day. He got a family barbecue, cake, and apparently every ounce of attention my parents could muster. I got silence. What hurt most wasn't just the empty seats. It was the way it confirmed what I'd been feeling for years, that Matt would always come first. He was the golden child, the athlete, the one with the big future, according to my parents. I was just the kid who had to figure everything out alone. When I scrolled further down my notifications, though, the pit in my stomach dropped deeper. My dad had spam called me 37 times during the ceremony. 37. And the last text he sent me, after I ignored the calls because, I was walking across a stage, was short and sharp. Come home immediately. That message burned into my head as I sat in my car afterward, parked under a tree outside the auditorium while other graduates hugged their families and posed for photos. I wanted to cry, but more than that, I wanted answers. Why was it so urgent that my dad blew up my phone while ignoring the fact that I was graduating? Why couldn't they have waited 2 hours to drag me back home? My gut told me it wasn't about me at all. It never was. And as much as I hated to admit it, that single text, combined with the missed calls, was the beginning of something bigger. Something that would change everything between me and my family. But I guess before I dive into what happened when I got home, you need to understand the way things always were in my family. My parents had a pattern. Matt's achievements were paraded around like Olympic medals. My soccer games in high school, barely a mention. My brother's C+ on a math test? He's brilliant, just not applying himself. My scholarships? That's great, but Matt's varsity football banquet is the same night. We'll see if we can make it. They didn't. That was always the line. We'll see. And when it came to me, it always meant no. I remember when I got my acceptance letter into the university. I opened it in the kitchen, so excited I could barely breathe, and showed it to my mom. She smiled politely, nodded, and then said, "That's wonderful, honey. But can you help Matt with his history paper? He's really struggling." It was like my milestones were treated as background noise, just another thing happening in the house, while Matt's every sneeze was broadcast on a loudspeaker. And I put up with it, year after year, because some part of me still believed graduation would be different. That one day, when my name was called and I walked across that stage, they would finally see me. Instead, I walked alone. I drove home alone. And I opened the front door to the smell of frosting and barbecue smoke, laughter pouring out of the living room, and my entire family crowded around Matt as he cut into his giant cake with his name plastered across it. My diploma case still clutched in my hand. My dad finally looked up and said, "Mark, you're late. We need to talk." That was it. No congratulations. No, we're proud of you. Just that cold, clipped tone he always used when he was about to tell me I owed the family something. And that's where things started to unravel. Because the reason he called me home wasn't just about a family barbecue. It was about money. It was about control. And it was about to drag me into the ugliest family fight I had ever faced. I stepped into the house, diploma case still in my hand, and the noise from the living room hit me like a wall. Everyone was there, my parents, my aunts and uncles, even some of Matt's friends from school. The dining table was covered in trays of food, balloons taped to the walls, and a big banner that read "Happy 18th Matt" in bold gold letters. It looked like something out of a catalog. And there I was, standing in the doorway with the piece of paper I'd spent years fighting for, invisible in plain sight. Matt spotted me first. He had frosting smeared on his cheek, knife still in his hand from cutting the cake. "Oh, hey, Mark," he said with a smirk, his voice dripping with fake surprise. "Didn't think you'd make it. Too busy with your, little school thing?" Everyone laughed like he'd just cracked the joke of the century. My cheeks burned. Little school thing. For years of sweat and sacrifice reduced to a throwaway line, like I'd wasted my time on a hobby. My mom swooped in then, wiping her hands on an apron and giving me the quickest hug possible. "You look nice," she said automatically, not even glancing at the diploma case. "We saved you a plate. Go sit down before the food gets cold." She moved past me without another word, fussing over Matt, who leaned back in his chair like a king surrounded by his court. My dad, however, didn't laugh, didn't smile. He was sitting at the head of the table, his phone in hand, his expression serious. He gestured for me to follow him into the kitchen, away from the crowd. "We need to talk," he repeated, his tone sharp enough to cut through the noise. I followed, my heart pounding, already bracing myself. He closed the kitchen door behind us and folded his arms. "Mark," he said, "your brother is about to be an adult. We're planning some big things for his future. College, a car, maybe even helping him put a down payment on a condo someday. But right now, we need everyone in the family to contribute." The words hit me like ice water. "Contribute." I echoed. He nodded. "You've got that job lined up after graduation, don't you? It's only fair you help out. You're the oldest. Your brother has potential, real potential, but he needs support. This family has always pulled together, and now it's your turn." I stared at him, stunned. "So, let me get this straight. You couldn't show up to my graduation, but now you're asking me to give you money for Matt's future. Don't make this about you," he snapped instantly, his voice rising. "We celebrated you when you got into college. We supported you in our own way. But your brother, he's the one who can really go places. You'll be fine on your own. You always have been." I wanted to scream. Supported me in their own way? The memory of taking out student loans flashed through my mind. Working late nights at a gas station to pay for books. Eating instant noodles while Matt got new cleats every season. Fine on my own. I had no choice but to be fine on my own. When we came back into the living room, my dad clapped his hands to get everyone's attention. "We were just talking," he announced loudly, like it was some kind of family decision we'd both agreed on. "Mark's going to help pitch in for Matt's future. He understands how important this is." All eyes turned to me. My mom beamed. My aunts murmured about what a good brother I was. And Matt? He leaned back in his chair, grinning smugly. "Thanks, bro," he said, raising his soda can like a toast. "Knew you'd come through." I stood there frozen, every word catching in my throat. My dad had just volunteered my future like it was a family resource, something they could carve up and hand to Matt as another present. Nobody even asked me. Nobody even cared what I thought. Later, as I sat at the edge of the room, picking at the plate of food my mom had pushed into my hands, I overheard snippets of conversation that twisted the knife deeper. My uncle leaned over to Matt. "So, you're getting the car next month, right? That'll be huge for you." My aunt chimed in. "With Mark helping out, you'll have a real leg up. Not everyone's lucky enough to have such a supportive older brother." Supportive. That word echoed in my head like a curse. Supportive, when they never supported me. Supportive, when my own graduation was treated like an inconvenience. Supportive, when all they saw me as was a wallet. And then, as if to rub salt in the wound, Matt opened his next gift, a brand new watch. My mom clasped her hands together, eyes shining. "You deserve it, sweetheart," she said proudly. "You've worked so hard this year." Worked hard? He'd coasted through high school on charm and excuses, while I fought tooth and nail for everything. And still, the applause, the gifts, the adoration, it all belonged to him. Sitting there, invisible in a room full of people, I realized something cold and sharp settling in my chest. They weren't just showing favoritism anymore. They were demanding my sacrifice to fuel his future. And if I didn't stop it, they'd bleed me dry, one family contribution at a time. I didn't know exactly how yet, but a part of me decided in that moment. I wasn't going to let them get away with this. That night, after the party wound down and the last of the guests filtered out, I stayed behind to help clean up. Not because anyone asked me to, no one ever did, but because it gave me an excuse to avoid the spotlight that always hovered over Matt. I stacked empty plates, gathered cups, and tied up trash bags while my parents gushed over how mature Matt looked blowing out his candles. Every word felt like it chipped away at me, but I swallowed it, waiting for the evening to be over so I could finally leave. When I went to grab my coat from the hallway, I noticed my dad's office door cracked open. Normally, he kept it shut like a vault, locked whenever he wasn't inside. Curiosity tugged at me, so I peeked in. His desk lamp glowed, papers scattered across the surface. But it wasn't the papers that caught my eye. It was the thick manila folder sitting square in the center, with my name written across the front in his handwriting. I hesitated, then stepped inside, my pulse quickening. I wasn't supposed to be in here, but something about that folder felt like it was daring me to look. I pulled it open, expecting maybe old report cards or documents from my college applications. Instead, I found bank statements, loan agreements, my student loan paperwork. But at the bottom of the stack, something made my stomach turn. A withdrawal slip for several $1,000s from my personal savings account. My account, the one I'd been putting money into since high school. The one I'd been saving from every miserable part-time job. The one I thought was mine. And scrawled in my dad's unmistakable handwriting across the margin, for Matt's car fund. I felt the blood drain from my face. I flipped through the pages faster, heart pounding. There were multiple slips, some small, some large, stretching back months. All withdrawals, all from my account, funneled neatly into what my dad had casually referred to earlier as family contributions. They hadn't just planned to use my future to fund Matt's. They already had. My hands trembled as I shoved the papers back into the folder. I wanted to confront them right then and there, but something inside me froze. I could already hear how it would go. "You're being selfish, Mark. This is what families do. Matt needs this more than you do." They'd make me the villain in my own story, and Matt would stand there smirking, like he always did when I got shoved into a corner. I set the folder down and walked back into the living room, trying to mask the fury boiling in my chest. Matt was lounging on the couch, scrolling through his phone with his new watch glinting under the light. My mom sat beside him, rubbing his shoulder, while my dad refilled his glass of soda like a waiter at a five-star restaurant. "Everything okay, Mark?" my dad asked casually, not even looking up. I forced a nod. "Yeah, fine." But I wasn't fine. I was holding onto a secret that had just detonated inside me. A betrayal so sharp it cut clean through the last shred of trust one had in them. They hadn't just ignored my graduation. They hadn't just asked me to contribute. They had already taken what was mine, what I'd bled and sweated for, and handed it to Matt like it was his birthright. Later that night, after I finally left and sat in my car with the engine off, I couldn't stop replaying it in my head. Every time my dad had told me, "We'll help you when we can." Every time my mom said, "Don't worry, we've got your back." They weren't promises. They were lies. Lies to keep me compliant while they siphoned away everything I built for myself. And the worst part? Matt knew. I could see it in the smug little grin he flashed when I walked back into the living room. He knew, and he enjoyed it. That was the moment something broke inside me. Not just disappointment. Not just frustration. Something harder. Colder. For the first time, I realized my family wasn't just neglectful or biased. They were opportunistic. They were willing to take everything from me to keep Matt on his pedestal. I drove home with my diploma case in the passenger seat, but it didn't feel like an achievement anymore. It felt like a shield, something I'd need if I wanted to survive the war my family had silently declared against me. And as I lay awake that night, staring at the ceiling, I made myself a promise. I wouldn't confront them yet. Not until I had a plan. Not until I knew exactly how to turn their betrayal into a weapon. Because if they thought I'd just keep giving, they were about to learn the hard way what happens when you push someone too far. The next few weeks were some of the hardest of my life. Graduation was supposed to feel like a beginning, a new chapter, a clean slate. Instead, it felt like the walls of everything I had built were closing in on me. Every time I checked my bank account, the reality stared me down, thousands of dollars gone, drained by the very people who were supposed to have my back. I still went through the motions. I showed up to my new job at the marketing firm on time, wore my press shirts, and smiled when my manager congratulated me for making a strong start. On the outside, I looked fine, but inside, I was unraveling. Every morning, I'd wake up with this heaviness in my chest, knowing that while I was trying to take steps forward, my family had already yanked me 3 steps back. I stopped answering their calls for a while. My dad would text things like, "When can we expect you to pitch in?" Or, Matt's tuition deposit is due soon. We need to talk. My mom would sprinkle hers with guilt. It hurt Matt that you didn't come to his game. Or, family helps family, Mark. Don't shut us out. Every message made my stomach twist. I couldn't even open the family group chat anymore without feeling sick. And yet, as much as I wanted to walk away, a part of me couldn't. Not fully. I was tethered to them by years of conditioning, by that quiet voice that whispered, maybe they'll see you eventually. Maybe if you just give a little more, they'll finally treat you as part of the family. That hope, however faint, kept me answering the occasional call, kept me driving over on Sundays when my mom insisted I come for dinner. Those dinners became unbearable. Matt would sit at the head of the table now, telling stories about his football team or bragging about the new car my savings had helped buy. He'd toss me smug glances, as if daring me to say something. My parents, oblivious or willfully blind, would nod along, praising him for being so responsible now that he's an adult. I remember one night in particular. My dad raised a toast to Matt, saying, "We're so proud of you, son. You've got the world ahead of you." Then he turned to me, almost as an afterthought. "And Mark, thanks for stepping up to help your brother. That's what family does." The clinking of glasses rang in my ears like mockery. I didn't even lift mine. I just sat there, staring at my plate, while my hands curled into fists under the table. They had no idea what that help cost me. They didn't care. It was then I realized I was reaching a breaking point. I couldn't keep subjecting myself to this cycle. Work hard, get drained, sit through dinners where my existence was background noise. But walking away wasn't easy either. Family bonds, no matter how frayed, have a way of holding on to you like chains. So I started small. I stopped telling them about my life. When my mom asked about work, I gave vague answers. When my dad pressed about my salary, I deflected. I became quieter at dinners, fading into the background so thoroughly they barely noticed when I left early. In those moments of silence, though, something was happening. Beneath the exhaustion and anger, I was quietly collecting pieces of a plan. I started saving again, this time in an account they didn't know about. I combed through my bank records, carefully noting every unauthorized withdrawal, building a private file of evidence. I didn't know what I'd do with it yet, but just having it made me feel like I had some control again. And I started watching, paying attention to the way my dad managed money, to the things Matt bragged about, to the cracks in their perfect little picture. Matt had a habit of overspending, designer shoes, video games, fancy dinners with his friends. My parents covered for him, but I noticed the stress in their voices when they thought he wasn't listening. Bills piling up, a mortgage payment missed, the car loan not as under control as they claimed. For the first time, I saw them not as an untouchable wall I could never climb, but as a structure with weaknesses, fault lines that could be exploited if I was careful. Still, in the meantime, I sank lower. My trust was gone, my savings stolen, and my achievements dismissed. Some nights I sat in my apartment staring at the diploma on the wall, wondering if it meant anything at all. Was it just a piece of paper, or could it be the weapon I needed to carve out a life beyond their reach? I didn't have all the answers yet. All I knew was that if I stayed on the path they wanted for me, I'd be nothing more than Matt's shadow, his silent benefactor. And I was done being invisible. I wasn't strong enough yet to strike back, but I was patient. And patience, I realized, might be the one thing my family underestimated about me. The shift didn't happen overnight. It started with little things, small victories that felt almost too insignificant to matter at first, but each one built on the last until I realized I was no longer stuck at the bottom. My job, for one, became more than just a paycheck. I threw myself into it, partly to escape the weight of my family's expectations, partly because it was the one place where my hard work actually counted. My manager noticed quickly. Within a couple of months, I was trusted with projects most new hires didn't touch for a year. I stayed late when I needed to, not out of desperation, but because I wanted to see what I could build when no one was there to dismiss me. And when the results came in, campaigns that outperformed expectations, clients who remembered my name, it was like breathing clean air for the first time. The first raise came faster than I thought it would. A modest bump in pay, but enough to make me feel like I was finally moving forward again. Instead of funneling that money into the same old account, I opened a new one under a digital-only bank. No paper statements, no chance of my dad finding it shoved in a drawer like the last time. This one was mine, truly mine. Every paycheck, I skimmed off a percentage and tucked it away like a secret weapon. Outside of work, I started reconnecting with people I'd drifted from. Friends who had been there in high school and college. People I'd pulled away from because family drama always swallowed my attention. It was strange at first, showing up to happy hours, answering texts I used to ignore. But slowly, it reminded me I had a world beyond my parents' house. One friend even introduced me to a mentor, a financial advisor who, after hearing my story, gave me a simple but life-changing piece of advice. Don't just save, invest. So I did. Carefully, quietly, I started putting money into stocks, a retirement account, even a small side business opportunity with a colleague. It wasn't flashy, but it was mine. Every decision was mine. For the first time, I wasn't just surviving, I was building. Meanwhile, back at my parents' house, the cracks I'd noticed before started widening. Matt loved flaunting his new car, taking road trips with friends, buying expensive clothes he couldn't afford. He racked up credit card debt so quickly I heard my mom whispering about it over the phone when she thought no one was listening. My dad, still pretending everything was under control, started pressing me harder. "Mark, you need to pitch in again," he'd say. "Matt's got a big future, and we can't let a little financial strain hold him back." But this time, I didn't cave. I smiled politely at dinners, said I'd look at my budget, then changed the subject. I watched their frustration build as they realized I wasn't as easy to manipulate anymore. It was subtle, but I could feel the balance shifting. The real turning point came at work when I landed a major client, a contract big enough that my boss pulled me into his office and said, "You've got a future here, Mark. Not just as an employee, but as a leader." He gave me a bonus on the spot. When I transferred that money into my secret account, I couldn't stop grinning. For once, my hard work translated into something tangible, something untouchable by anyone else. I started dressing sharper, speaking more confidently, carrying myself differently. Friends noticed. Colleagues noticed. Even strangers seemed to treat me with more respect. And every time I caught my reflection, I saw a version of myself that no longer resembled the invisible kid at my parents' dinner table. Of course, my family didn't miss the change either. At the next Sunday dinner, Matt eyed my watch, a modest one I bought to replace the cracked plastic one I'd worn for years, and made a snide comment. "Guess work is paying off, huh? Maybe you can finally get me those new tires I need." I laughed. Not bitterly, not nervously, just laughed. "Maybe you should get them yourself, Matt." The table went quiet for a beat, and the look on his face was worth every ounce of restraint I'd practiced. My dad quickly smoothed it over, changing the subject, but I saw the flicker in his eyes too, the realization that I wasn't falling in line anymore. It was intoxicating, that feeling. Power, even in small doses, was addictive. I wasn't ready to make my move yet, but I could feel the tide turning. And deep down, I knew. If I kept building, if I stayed patient, the day would come when I wouldn't just defend myself from their manipulation. I would be in a position to turn the tables completely. Because what my family never understood was this. The kid they ignored, the son they drained dry, was learning how to grow stronger in silence. And soon enough, silence would give way to something they couldn't laugh off, couldn't guilt me out of, couldn't control. The real opening came in the most unexpected way, through Matt himself. By this point, I'd grown used to tuning out his constant bragging. Every Sunday dinner turned into a highlight reel of his achievements, his football stats, the parties he got invited to, the expensive things he wanted next. But one evening, in between bites of steak my parents had grilled just for Matt, he slipped up. He was showing off his new phone to my uncle, scrolling through photos of himself and his friends posing in front of his car. In the middle of all that flexing, a notification banner slid across his screen before he could hide it. "Payment past due. First National Bank." My uncle didn't notice, but I did. And when Matt's face briefly twisted into irritation before he brushed it off with another story, a light flickered in my mind. I knew he'd been reckless, but this was the first time I had confirmation that his spending wasn't just careless, it was catching up with him. Over the next couple of weeks, I started paying attention with sharper eyes. I noticed the stack of unopened envelopes on the console table by the front door, all from banks and credit card companies. I overheard my mom snapping at my dad late one night when I stopped by unexpectedly. "We can't keep covering for him. We're drowning too." My dad hushed her quickly when he realized I was nearby, but the words had already lodged in my head. They were in trouble. Serious trouble. And unlike before, when they leaned on me without shame, I was in a position to see just how weak they'd become. Around the same time, my own job was skyrocketing. That big client I'd landed, they referred me to another, and then another. Before I knew it, I wasn't just one of the promising new hires. I was the guy they trusted to lead major accounts. The bonus checks started stacking up, and my mentor pushed me to do something I'd never thought possible. Open my own LLC on the side, consulting for smaller businesses who couldn't afford my firm's fees. At first, I hesitated. Wouldn't it be too much? But when I ran the numbers, my jaw dropped. Even a few clients on the side could double what I'd been saving every month. So I went for it, working evenings from my apartment, pouring the same focus into my clients as I did my full-time job. And it paid off. Within 6 months, my little side project was pulling in nearly as much as my salary. I set up a separate business account, careful and deliberate, every penny tracked. And here's the irony. While my family still treated me like the kid they could lean on, I was quietly becoming the one with real power. The kind of power they'd never expect, because they were too busy watching Matt spiral. The real turning point came when my dad called me on a Wednesday evening, his voice tight. "Mark, we need to talk. It's urgent." I almost ignored it. I'd been working on a client presentation, but something in his tone made me pick up. He danced around the subject for a while, asking how work was, whether I was doing well financially. Then he finally dropped it. "We need help with the house. Just a small loan to cover the mortgage. Things are a little tight with Matt starting college." I nearly laughed. A little tight. That was his way of saying they were sinking. And here he was, circling back to the same script he'd used at Matt's birthday, trying to frame it as family pulling together. But this time, I didn't answer right away. Instead, I asked questions. How far behind are you? What's the interest rate? Why hasn't Matt picked up more hours at his job? The silence on the other end was deafening. My dad muttered something about private family matters and then tried to guilt me. "Don't be selfish, Mark. You know we've always done everything for you." The old me would have caved under that guilt. The new me smiled, scribbled notes on a pad by my desk, and said, "Let me think about it." I hung up, heart racing, because now I had exactly what I needed. Proof that they weren't invincible, that their pedestal was crumbling. Over the next week, I started piecing things together. Public records, bank notices I discreetly glanced at when visiting, even whispers from relatives who had loaned my parents money and hadn't been paid back. It all painted the same picture. They were drowning financially, and Matt's endless demands had dragged them down faster. And me? I wasn't drowning anymore. I was standing on solid ground, watching them flail. For the first time in my life, I realized I held the upper hand. They needed me. They needed what I had built. The thought of it filled me with a strange mix of emotions. Anger, satisfaction, even a bit of fear. Because holding power was one thing. Deciding what to do with it was another. But one thing was clear. If I played this right, I wouldn't just protect myself from being drained again. I'd be able to make them feel exactly what they'd made me feel for years. Powerless, overlooked, desperate. And I wasn't going to waste that opportunity. When the opportunity finally presented itself, it felt almost too perfect. A few weeks after that tense phone call with my dad, my mom invited me over for dinner, her tone unusually sweet. I knew what that meant. They wanted something. Sure enough, the moment I stepped into the living room, I spotted Matt on the couch, pouting like a child, while my dad paced the floor. On the coffee table lay a stack of papers, neatly arranged but bristling with tension. "Mark," my dad started, trying to mask his urgency. "We need your help." Again, he gestured toward the papers. "The mortgage company is threatening foreclosure. It's all a misunderstanding, really, just a few payments behind. But if you could step in, temporarily, it would stabilize things until we're back on track." My mom chimed in, her voice soft, almost pleading. "You've always been so responsible, honey. We know we can count on you." And then Matt, smirking as always, added, "Yeah, bro, think of it as an investment. Once I get into the big leagues, I'll pay you back." He leaned back, crossing his arms, like he'd already decided I was in. For the first time in my life, I didn't feel small in that room. I didn't feel invisible or cornered. I felt calm, steady, in control. I sat down on the couch opposite them, folding my hands in my lap. "Okay," I said evenly. "Let's look at what you're asking." I picked up the stack of papers and flipped through them. Missed payments. interest charges, penalty fees stacking higher and higher. It was worse than I thought. They weren't just a little behind. They were months from losing everything. So, I continued, my tone polite. You want me to bail you out? It's not a bailout, my dad snapped, his patience already thinning. It's family helping family. Funny, I said, tilting my head. Because I don't remember anyone helping me when I was working nights just to afford books. Or when my own savings. I let the word hang in the air. Suddenly disappeared. My dad's jaw tightened. My mom shifted uncomfortably. And Matt, realizing where I was going, quickly jumped in. That was different, Mark. You know it was for the greater good. You're fine now, aren't you? I smiled. Not the bitter, forced smile I used to wear at their table. A real one. Because this was the moment I'd been waiting for. You're right, I said calmly. I am fine now. Better than fine, actually. Which is why I can make you an offer. Their eyes lit up at that, relief flooding the room. My dad even sat down, as if he'd already won. Go on, he said eagerly. I'll cover the mortgage, I said slowly. But on one condition, the house goes into my name. Full ownership. No tricks, no half measures. You sign it over, and I'll make the payments. Otherwise, I tapped the papers with my finger. You'll have to figure it out on your own. The silence that followed was deafening. My mom's mouth fell open. My dad's face turned red, anger and disbelief warring in his expression. And Matt looked like someone had just told him Christmas was canceled. You can't be serious, my dad finally barked. That house is ours. You think you can just swoop in and take it? I don't think, I said evenly. I know. Because here's the truth. You need me. Without me, you lose the house. With me, you keep a roof over your heads, under my roof. Those are the terms. Take it or leave it. My mom started to cry, pleading with me to be reasonable, but I stayed firm. Years of being overlooked, dismissed, drained, it all crystallized into this single, steady moment. I wasn't shouting. I wasn't begging. I was calm. And that calm terrified them more than anger ever could. Matt slammed his fist on the table. You can't do this. Dad, tell him he can't do this. But my dad didn't answer right away. Because deep down, he knew I could. He knew I was holding all the cards. I stood, gathering the papers into a neat stack. Think it over, I said. But don't take too long. The bank's deadline isn't going to wait. And with that, I walked out, leaving them stunned in their own living room. My phone buzzed with calls and texts for hours afterward, alternating between rage and desperation, but I didn't answer. Not yet. For the first time in my life, they needed me more than I needed them. And I wasn't about to waste that leverage. They didn't take long to cave. 3 days later, my dad called me again. His voice hollow, stripped of the authority he'd always worn like armor. Bring the paperwork, he said. We'll sign. I drove over that evening with a folder tucked under my arm. The same kind of manila folder I'd once found in his office with my name scrawled across it. Only this time, it was his name on the line. My parents sat at the kitchen table, eyes downcast. Matt sulked in the corner, arms folded, glaring at me like a child denied dessert. The signing itself was quiet, almost clinical. My dad's hand trembled as he pressed the pen to paper, each signature a reluctant surrender. My mom dabbed at her eyes with a tissue, whispering this isn't fair, under her breath, but she didn't fight it. And Matt exploded the moment it was done. You're a thief, he shouted, leaping to his feet. This house should have been mine one day. You stole it from me. I looked him dead in the eye. No, Matt, you stole from me. This is just balance. He stormed out, slamming the door so hard the picture frames rattled on the wall. My parents flinched, but I didn't. For once, his tantrums had no power over me. I collected the papers, slipped them back into the folder, and stood. The bank will get their payment tomorrow. The house is safe, for now. But remember, it's mine. You stay here because I allow it. My dad opened his mouth like he wanted to argue, then closed it again. The weight of his silence was almost satisfying. My mom tried to appeal to me one last time, her voice quivering. We're still your family, Mark. Doesn't that mean anything? I paused in the doorway, the same doorway I'd walked through countless times, invisible and overlooked. I thought about all the years of being dismissed, all the sacrifices they demanded without thanks, all the empty chairs at my graduation. Then I turned back just enough to meet her eyes. Family is earned. And with that, I left. The next morning, I wired the payment to the bank, securing the deed in my name. The house, the symbol of everything they had lorded over me, was now mine. My parents walked on eggshells around me after that, and Matt could barely look at me without seething. The pedestal he'd been placed on for 18 years crumbled overnight, and there was nothing they could do to rebuild it. For the first time in my life, I wasn't the overlooked son, the backup, the wallet. I was the one with the power. And as I drove past the house a week later, deed tucked safely in my briefcase, I couldn't help but think back to that empty row of seats at my graduation. They hadn't shown up for me then. But now, every single day, they were forced to live under a roof that proved one undeniable truth. I had finally shown up for myself. My name is Jessica. I'm 32 years old, and up until recently, I thought I had a pretty solid relationship with my parents. I never expected anything major to come out of the blue, especially not the shocking revelation that completely flipped my world upside down. For most of my life, I'd been taught that family always came first. It wasn't just something they said, it was a rule we lived by. My parents drilled it into me, and to be honest, I had taken it to heart. It wasn't just about the big moments, either holidays, birthdays, those were all expected. But it was also about the little stuff. If my parents needed help with something, I'd be there. When they'd gone through financial struggles, I stepped up. I did what I could to be the good daughter, the one who always put family above everything else. And because of this, I thought that when it came time for major decisions like the will or future care, I'd be included. I was wrong. It all started when I came home one evening after work. I had been feeling unusually exhausted lately, trying to juggle work, keeping up with friends, and managing a bunch of household stuff. So when I got an email from my mom asking to talk, I didn't think much of it. The subject line was simple, important talk. The message, however, was anything but. She basically asked me to come over the next day to discuss some family matters. So, of course, I called her up to see what was going on. "Hey, what's up? Is everything okay?" I asked, trying to hide the growing knot in my stomach. She hesitated for a second. "Yeah, everything's fine. Just come over tomorrow." I agreed, but I was curious, and that little feeling of unease was starting to gnaw at me. The next day, I showed up at my parents' house around noon, as agreed. My mom greeted me with her usual warm smile, but there was a stiffness about her that I couldn't quite place. My dad was there, too, sitting on the couch, but he didn't say much, which was unusual for him. We sat down at the kitchen table, and the tension in the air was almost palpable. After a few moments of awkward silence, my mom finally spoke. "We need to talk about something important, Jess," she said, her voice a little too calm, like she was preparing me for bad news. "Okay, what is it?" She sighed deeply, glancing at my dad before looking back at me. "We've updated our will. And, well, we've made some decisions." Now, I don't know why, but at that moment, my heart began to race. Something didn't feel right. I tried to remain calm, but I couldn't help the worry creeping up my spine. "What do you mean? Is everything okay?" "We're just doing what's best," my mom said, her voice becoming more serious. "We've decided to leave everything to your brother, Daniel." I felt the air in the room freeze. "Wait, what? What do you mean everything?" "You're leaving everything to Daniel." She nodded, her eyes not meeting mine. "Yes, Jess. We've talked about it, and we think it's the right decision. We're leaving him everything, house, savings, everything we've worked for." My mind started to swirl. I could barely process the words. But I thought family came first? I thought I was supposed to be a part of this, too. Mom shook her head. "You know, Jess, we've always tried to do our best for you. But Daniel has been more reliable in recent years. He's been there for us more, and well, we just think it's time to focus on him." I felt my hands start to shake. "More reliable? Are you kidding me? I've been helping you with bills, groceries, all sorts of things for years. I've been there for you when you needed it. And Daniel? What has he done? I don't get it." My dad finally spoke up, his voice quieter than usual. "Jess, we're just trying to be practical. Daniel is the one who's going to be taking care of things. He's got the time, the resources. We just think it makes sense." "But this doesn't make sense," I said, my voice rising despite my attempts to stay calm. "I've always been there for you. You can't just cut me out like this." There was a long pause, and I could feel the weight of their silence. The look on my mom's face was almost apologetic, but it wasn't enough to make me feel any better. I stood up abruptly, my chair scraping against the floor, and I felt my breath quicken. "I don't know what's going on with you two, but this is not how family works." As I turned to leave, I heard my dad's voice. Jess, just think about it. But I didn't want to think about it. I was furious. My head was spinning, and I didn't know what to do with all the emotions swirling inside me. How could they do this to me? How could they just turn their backs after everything I'd done? For the next few weeks, I couldn't shake the feeling that something wasn't right. I kept thinking about the will, about how they just handed everything to Daniel, and about how they seemed so nonchalant about it. It felt like betrayal. And that's when I decided to make a move. It wasn't about revenge at first. It was about standing up for myself, about showing them that I wasn't going to let them treat me like this. I'd been paying for some of their bills, helping them out with utilities, and I wasn't going to keep doing it if they were going to leave me out of everything. So, I stopped. I stopped paying their bills. I figured if they didn't care about me anymore, then why should I care about keeping the lights on for them? A month passed. I hadn't heard much from them, just the occasional text asking how I was doing, but nothing that felt personal. Nothing that made me feel like they regretted their decision. Then, one afternoon, I got a text from my mom. Why is the electricity off? My heart raced. The moment I read that message, I felt a rush of vindication mixed with guilt. It had worked. But at the same time, I couldn't ignore the cold pit in my stomach. Was this what I wanted? To make them feel the way I felt? To watch them struggle? I didn't reply immediately. Instead, I stared at the message for a long time, the words blinking at me, demanding an answer. Finally, I tapped out a simple reply. I thought you had everything covered with Daniel. Maybe you should ask him about it. And then, I put my phone down, letting the silence hang between us. I had no idea what would happen next, but I couldn't help but feel a sense of power I hadn't had in weeks. The next few days passed slowly, each one dragging as I waited for the fallout. I kept replaying the conversation over and over in my head, wondering if I had done the right thing. A part of me wanted to feel bad, wanted to call them and apologize, or at least explain myself better. But then I'd think about everything they'd said, about how they had decided to exclude me without a second thought, and I'd feel a surge of anger again. The truth was, I was hurt. I was angry. And more than anything, I was done being the one who always had to put everyone else first. The silence was deafening. A few days later, I was sitting on my couch, scrolling through my phone, when I got another message from my mom. This time, it was a bit longer. Jessica, this has gone too far. We need to talk. I don't understand why you're punishing us like this. We're your family. You shouldn't be acting like this. I didn't even hesitate. My fingers hovered over the screen as I typed a quick reply. Maybe you should have thought about that before you cut me out of everything. I'm not the one who needs to explain myself. I set my phone down, the weight of what I'd just written sinking in. My hands were shaking, but I couldn't back down now. There was no turning back. Not after everything. Another few days went by. I couldn't help but notice that my phone was eerily quiet. No more texts, no phone calls, no pressure to fix things. It was like they'd given up. But still, I kept waiting. I knew something had to give. They couldn't just let me walk away without trying to fix it. Could they? Then, on a Thursday evening, my phone rang. I didn't even have to look at the screen to know who it was. It was my mom's name, flashing across the display. My heart thudded in my chest, but I took a deep breath and answered. Hello. Jessica, my mom started, her voice quiet. I don't know what you want from us, but we're your parents. We've always tried to do what's best for you, even if it's not what you wanted to hear. I could hear her voice tremble, and something inside me softened. But I quickly pushed the feeling aside. This was the same woman who had said I wasn't reliable enough to inherit anything from them. I wasn't going to let myself get manipulated again. I don't want anything from you, Mom. You made your choice, and so did I. You've made it clear where I stand, so don't expect me to keep cleaning up the mess. Her silence on the other end of the line was almost worse than anything she could have said. For a long moment, neither of us spoke. Finally, she broke the silence. Please, just come over. We need to talk about this in person. I could feel the weight of the conversation pressing in on me. The temptation to give in, to go back and try to fix things, was overwhelming. But I couldn't do it. Not when I was still so angry. Not when everything felt like a lie. I'll think about it, I said, before quickly hanging up. The conversation left me reeling, but I couldn't let it change my mind. I was tired of being the only one who cared. It was their turn to show up. The next day, my phone buzzed again. Another message from my mom. This time one that made my heart drop. I spoke to Daniel. He's upset too. He said he didn't ask for all of this. He's just following what we told him. I stared at the message for what felt like hours. Daniel? Upset? Was this really happening? My brother and I weren't close. We hadn't been for years. He'd always been the golden child, the one who could do no wrong in my parents' eyes. But now, after everything, he was suddenly upset. I didn't know what to think. Was he really upset? Or was this just another attempt to get me to cave? I couldn't tell. I tossed my phone aside, feeling more lost than I had in weeks. My mind was spinning, trying to figure out if there was any truth in what my mom had said. Daniel upset? I couldn't even picture it. Later that afternoon, I decided to take a walk. I needed some space to clear my head. The sun was low in the sky, casting long shadows on the sidewalk, but I didn't feel the warmth of it. My thoughts were cold, swirling around like a storm I couldn't outrun. It was then that I got another text. This time, it wasn't from my mom. It was from Daniel. "Jess, can we talk?" I paused mid-step, the phone buzzing in my hand like it had some kind of gravitational pull on me. My heart started racing again, but I didn't know why. Part of me wanted to ignore him, to let the silence continue. But another part of me wondered if this was the breakthrough I'd been waiting for. Maybe Daniel really was upset, and maybe he didn't agree with everything Mom and Dad had done. So, against my better judgment, I tapped out a quick response. "What do you want to talk about?" The reply came almost instantly. "I don't want to fight anymore. Can we meet up and figure this out?" My finger hovered over the screen, uncertainty flooding me. Could I trust him? Could I really sit down with him and have an honest conversation without it turning into another mess? I started walking again, the steady rhythm of my steps giving me a sense of control. I stared at the phone in my hand. It felt like I was on the edge of something, about to make a choice that could change everything. But then another message popped up. "It's not just about the will, Jess. It's about everything. I think you've been treated unfairly too, and I'm sorry." That was it. The words I've been waiting for. But now, everything felt even more complicated than before. I didn't know what to do. Should I meet him? Should I trust him? Could this really be the turning point? Or was I just setting myself up for more disappointment? I stood there, staring at the message, my mind racing. The world felt like it was on the verge of something big. But I had no idea how it was going to play out. I stood there, phone in hand, the weight of Daniel's message pressing down on me. I felt a flood of emotions, but at the core of it all was the undeniable urge to finally have my say, to take control back. I stared at the text for another few seconds before replying, trying to sound calm, despite the storm raging inside me. "Fine, we'll meet," I typed back. "But I'm not doing this for them. I'm doing this for me." Within minutes, Daniel sent back a time and place. A small cafe we used to go to together when we were younger. It wasn't far from my apartment, but I didn't feel the nostalgia I expected. Instead, I felt a tinge of dread. What if this was another trap? What if he just wanted to make me feel guilty for standing up for myself? But I pushed those thoughts away. This wasn't about guilt. This was about setting things right, about taking the power back. I wasn't going to let anyone manipulate me anymore. I arrived at the cafe early, trying to steady my nerves. The place was quiet, the late afternoon sun casting warm light through the windows. I took a seat at the corner table, tapping my fingers nervously on the surface. The minutes dragged on, but I didn't reach for my phone. I wasn't going to check the time every 5 seconds. I was in control now, not them. Finally, Daniel walked in. He looked different, softer somehow. Not the cocky, golden child I'd always known, but someone who seemed broken. I could see the tiredness in his eyes, the tightness in his posture. He wasn't the enemy anymore. He was just another person caught in the mess. I gestured for him to sit, and he did, hesitating for a moment before speaking. "Jess," he started, his voice lower than usual. "I'm sorry. I didn't realize how bad things had gotten. I didn't see it until now." I nodded, but my thoughts were racing. This was the moment. I had to hold my ground, not let my guard down. "You didn't realize? Or you just didn't care?" I said, my voice steadier than I felt. "You've always been the golden boy, the one who never had to fight for anything, while I was the one cleaning up after everyone. Always second place." His face flushed, guilt washing over him. "That's not how I saw it, Jess. But I see now. You were right to be upset. They took you for granted, and I didn't do anything to stop it." I stared at him for a long moment, trying to assess whether he was being genuine. His apology seemed sincere, but it didn't change everything that had happened. It didn't undo the hurt. "You're right. You didn't do anything to stop it. Neither did Mom. Neither did Dad." I paused, locking eyes with him. "But you know what? I'm done. Done being the one who always sacrifices. Done being the one who cleans up the mess. I'm taking control now. Daniel looked at me, confusion creeping into his expression. What do you mean? I took a deep breath, then dropped the bomb. I've already started. The bills? I'm done paying them. I haven't made a single payment since I found out about the will. No more electricity, no more water, no more gas. If they want their comfort, they'll have to deal with it themselves for once. His eyes widened in disbelief. Wait, you can't be serious. They'll what? Get mad? They already have. But this time, it's not my problem anymore. I've had enough of being treated like an afterthought. If they want me to help, they can show me some respect first. If they don't, well, they can handle their own mess. Daniel sat back in his chair, looking stunned. You're really doing this? I'm really doing this, I replied, the finality in my voice leaving no room for doubt. And you're welcome to join me, Daniel. If you want to stay in their good graces, that's your choice. But I'm done playing the role of the dutiful daughter. They don't get to push me around anymore. For a moment, neither of us spoke. The weight of my words hung in the air, thick with tension. Finally, Daniel broke the silence, his voice softer. I don't know if I can do that, Jess. I'm still trying to figure out where I stand in all of this. I nodded, understanding. I get it. But you need to know something. This isn't just about the money. It's about standing up for what's right. About having a backbone. You've spent your whole life letting them control the narrative. It's time to change that. He looked down at his hands, unsure of what to say. I could tell he was struggling with everything I'd just said. But it didn't matter. This wasn't about him anymore. It was about me. I stood up from the table, feeling a rush of confidence flood through me. I've made my choice, Daniel. You need to make yours. I'm not coming back to clean up the mess this time. With that, I turned and walked out of the cafe, leaving Daniel sitting there, lost in thought. My heart was pounding in my chest, but I felt a sense of calm wash over me. I had done it. I had taken control of my own life. Finally. No more guilt. No more manipulation. It felt good. It felt right. As I walked home, my phone buzzed again. This time, it was my mom. Jessica, why is the electricity off? What's going on? You need to fix this. We're your parents. We can't live like this. I read the message and felt a smile tug at the corner of my lips. This was it. The moment I'd been waiting for. I didn't reply. Not yet. Instead, I turned off my phone and slipped it into my pocket. I was done. For the first time in a long while, I felt free. The days that followed were a whirlwind. I could feel the tension build with every call, every text, every passive-aggressive comment from my parents. But I didn't budge. I stuck to my guns. They tried everything, from guilt trips to trying to bribe me back with promises of things I'd always wanted, things I didn't even care about anymore. One evening, a week after my conversation with Daniel, I got the text I was waiting for. It wasn't from Daniel this time. It was from my mom again, the tone even more frantic. Jessica, we need to talk. We can't go on like this. Your father and I are going to lose the house if you don't help. Please. I could feel the anger bubbling up inside me. My heart pounded in my chest. I took a deep breath, but this time, I wasn't going to let their manipulation work. Not again. I picked up my phone and typed the simplest, coldest response I could muster. I'm sorry you're in this situation, but I'm not going to be your safety net anymore. You've had plenty of chances to change, and you didn't. I'm done. I paused before sending the message, but in the end, I knew it was the right choice. My fingers hovered over the keyboard for a second longer, but the finality of my decision settled in. I hit send. The phone didn't buzz again for a while. The next day, I found out that my parents had called Daniel, begging him to step in, to get me to help. He didn't, of course, not this time. He was the first to text me afterward. Hey, I think you did the right thing. But it's hard. I feel like we're all losing something. I didn't know how to respond to that. What I did know was that I wasn't losing anything that I hadn't already lost long ago. The difference was, now I had control of the situation. Now I wasn't the one always cleaning up the mess. A week later, I got a call from my mom again. This time, it was more desperate. The bills hadn't been paid. The power had been shut off for several days, and my parents were really starting to feel the weight of their mistakes. But instead of apologizing, instead of acknowledging how badly they'd treated me, they still tried to guilt-trip me, to twist things to make me feel responsible. But I stayed firm. I didn't offer to help, and I didn't apologize for my choices. You can handle this on your own. You'll figure it out. Just like I had to figure things out, I said, trying to keep my voice steady. There was a long silence on the other end before she finally responded, her voice thick with frustration. I don't understand you anymore, Jessica. I let out a breath, relief flooding through me. That was the moment when I realized that this entire situation was never about me making them understand. It was about me finally understanding myself and taking my own life back. A week later, the electricity was still off, and I was okay with that. I wasn't angry anymore. I didn't feel the need to prove anything. I was free. For the first time in years, I could live my life without the constant pull of their demands, without feeling like I had to sacrifice my happiness for theirs. I'm not sure what happened next with my parents. I imagine they found a way to scramble and pay their bills, just like they always did when the pressure was on. But the difference was, I wasn't part of their plan anymore. And that was something I could live with. So here we are. I don't regret a single moment of it. It was hard, and at times, it felt like I was doing something wrong, but it was the best decision I ever made. It was my life, my choices, and my future on the line. And for once, I chose myself. So, Reddit, what do you think? Did I take it too far? Or was it about time I stopped being everyone's doormat? Let me know your thoughts. I'm Nathan, 30 years old as of last Saturday. Though honestly, it didn't feel like much of a milestone. I spent the day alone in my apartment, watching reruns of a sitcom I'd already seen 100 times, eating a slice of cheesecake I'd picked up the night before from the 24-hour grocery store around the corner. I didn't expect a party or anything grand, just a phone call. Maybe a happy birthday text with a cake emoji. But instead, around 9:47 p.m., long after the sun had set and the silence had started to sting, I got a message from my mom. Hope you had cake or something. That was it. No call, no visit, not even a follow-up. To most people, that might be disappointing. But for me, it was a slow burn on top of a bonfire that had been smoldering for years. I've always been the reliable one in the family, the fixer, the buffer between chaos and consequences. My parents had struggled financially ever since my dad's business partner vanished with half the company funds 5 years ago. I stepped in quietly, not because they asked, but because I couldn't stand seeing the foreclosure notices on the kitchen counter during visits. I began covering their mortgage, their home insurance, and even their cable subscription. That added up to about $3,000 a month, almost half of my take-home pay. I never told friends, not even my girlfriend at the time, who left after one too many late rent payments on our side. It was always, it's family. I have to. My sister, Danielle, on the other hand, has always managed to avoid responsibility like it was her full-time job. 2 years older, still living with them, still figuring things out. She works part-time at a boutique she hates, dates guys who cycle in and out like Wi-Fi signals, and somehow never contributes to anything, but has opinions on everything. When I once asked if she could maybe chip in $100 for the internet bill, she laughed and said, "That's your thing, Nate. You're good with money. You like doing this stuff." As if being responsible was a hobby. The message from my mom was just the last straw, not because it was mean, but because it was so hollow. No thought, no warmth. It made everything I'd sacrificed feel like a line item they'd grown to expect. And just when I was letting that sink in, a week later, she texted again. This time, chipper, upbeat, and out of nowhere, "We're throwing Dad's retirement party next weekend. $2,500 per person. Venmo me when you can. You're invited." No mention of my birthday. No apology for forgetting. Just a bold-faced ask for cash. I read the message twice. Then again, I wasn't even angry. I was numb. That cold, blank kind of numb that says you've given more than enough. It was the clearest I'd felt in months. That night, I logged into every portal I'd been quietly funneling money through. The mortgage account, the utilities, the cable provider, and stopped the auto payments. It took under 6 minutes. Just a few clicks, and that was it. No angry message. No rant. I didn't feel the need to explain myself anymore. I was done carrying the weight of people who didn't care enough to even acknowledge my existence unless it came with a dollar sign attached. By day 3, the silence was broken, not with an apology or concern, but with a text from Danielle. "Wait, did you stop paying?" I didn't answer immediately. I let it sit. I let them wonder while the lights flickered, the internet vanished, and the bills they hadn't looked at in years started stacking at the door. When I finally replied, it was simple. 5 words. "Guess you should have saved me a slice." But that's not where this ends. Not even close. Because when I thought that was the peak of their entitlement, What happened next made me question if they ever really saw me as a son at all, or just a walking paycheck with a convenient smile. See, 3 days after I sent that message, I got a call from my mom I didn't answer. Then another, and another. By the time the voicemail alert popped up, I knew something was coming. But I didn't expect the voicemail to say what it did. I played it on speaker as I cleaned my kitchen, and as her voice cracked through the phone, something in my stomach twisted. "Nathan, we need to talk," she began. "This is serious. We just had the city out here. Apparently the house is flagged for lien review or something. Your father's losing it. Danielle's crying. We didn't know you'd react like this. Please, just call me back." I paused mid-wipe on the counter, the rag dangling from my fingers. Lien review? I hadn't touched anything related to property taxes or official filings, at least, not yet. But maybe, just maybe, the gap left by my payments triggered a domino effect they didn't see coming. Maybe someone hadn't been paying attention at all, thinking I'd always be there, like a background app they never had to update or thank. Still, I didn't respond. Then my dad, who hadn't called me directly in almost 9 months, finally reached out. 2 missed calls. A voicemail I still haven't opened. Then, because apparently they were pulling every card, Danielle posted a vague status on Facebook. Some people think they're better than their own family. Money changes people. It had 10 likes, mostly from distant cousins I hadn't spoken to in years. I didn't comment, but I watched. I watched how no one asked what really happened. No one tagged me. No one even thought to reach out. They just fed on the narrative that I had somehow betrayed them. But here's the part they didn't count on. I didn't just stop paying. I started preparing. Because this wasn't just about money anymore. This was about finally taking back control from people who only remembered me when the lights went out. And what they don't know yet is that they're about to lose a lot more than cable. So here's the thing. For the last year and a half, I'd been the ghost landlord. Not officially, not on paper, but in practice. Every major bill, every emergency fix, every home insurance renewal had passed through me. When the water heater burst, I paid. When the roof needed patching, I arranged it. They signed nothing. They just let me handle it all because I was good with this stuff. But during one of those emergency fixes, specifically the roof repairs, I learned something they probably assumed I'd never find out. The house was never fully refinanced after the partner scandal. The bank never finalized the title transfer because of a missing document. And technically, the ownership was still split between my dad and my late grandfather. And my grandfather had left his 50% in a trust. A trust with a secondary beneficiary. Me. At the time, I didn't think much of it. It sounded like boring paperwork. But after I got that Venmo request for $2,500 and watched them treat me like a breathing ATM, I did some digging. Quietly, I contacted the trust manager. I sat through a few calls. I asked the right questions. Turns out that 50% of the house was mine to claim if I wanted it. And it also meant I could file a petition claim, force a buyout, or force a sale. That's when I realized something. They didn't just forget my birthday. They forgot I wasn't a kid anymore. And I was done letting that slide. So I made one more quiet move. I sent an official request through the attorney managing the trust to evaluate the property for sale. I didn't notify them. I didn't warn them. I just filed it. 4 days later, I got a call while I was at work. Unknown number. I almost let it ring out, but curiosity won. I picked up. It was my dad. "Nate, what is this?" he barked. "There's a letter taped to the door. Something about an evaluation? Are you trying to sell the house?" I kept my voice even. "I'm invoking my rights as a beneficiary. The trust owns half. I own half. You knew that, didn't you?" He went quiet for a beat. Then, "This is your home. What are you doing?" I nearly laughed. "No, Dad. Your home is where your respect went. I was just paying rent on it." Silence again. Then he hung up. By that evening, I'd received a barrage of messages from Danielle. "Are you serious right now? You're going to make us homeless because no one threw you a party? This is psychotic." And finally, "I hope you know Mom cried all night." That last one almost got me. Almost. Because part of me, the part they raised, the one trained to believe that guilt equals love, wanted to call, to explain, to soften the blow. But then I remembered how, when I got laid off briefly last year and needed a few weeks to get my finances back in order, Mom said, "You're a smart guy. You'll figure it out." And that was it. No offer to help. No groceries. No gas money. Just that. So no, I didn't reply to Danielle. I let her spiral. Let them all scramble. A few days passed in tense silence. Then, last night, I kid you not, my mom showed up at my apartment. She buzzed at the front door like a stranger. I almost didn't answer, but I figured it was time. She looked tired. The kind of tired that sinks into your bones when life stops going your way. "Nathan," she said, before I could speak. "Please don't do this. We're your family. We made mistakes, I admit that, but this is cruel." I didn't invite her in. I stood at the threshold and replied, "It wasn't cruel when I was covering every bill alone. It wasn't cruel when you forgot my birthday, or when you asked for $2,500 like it was nothing. That was different," she said. "We were trying to do something for your father. And what were you ever trying to do for me?" I asked calmly. She didn't have an answer, so I closed the door. This morning, I woke up to another voicemail, this one from an unknown number. It was the bank's lien department. The message was simple. "We've received a request regarding the pending claim on the property. Please confirm if you'd like to proceed with the petition." I haven't called back yet. Because here's the truth they still don't understand. It's not about the house. It's about everything they took for granted. Every sacrifice. Every missed moment. Every time they treated my presence like a given and my help like an obligation. They taught me that family meant support. But all they ever did was take. And now, for the first time, they're feeling what that absence looks like. And I haven't even made my final move. I didn't call the bank back that day. I let the voicemail sit unread in my inbox, the way they let my birthday sit unacknowledged. Instead, I took a walk. Not a rage-fueled stomp down the block or a revenge-planning march, but a slow, deliberate walk through the neighborhood I grew up in. It was a cloudy morning, the kind where the sun can't decide whether to show up or not. And honestly, I related. I passed by the old library where I'd wait for Mom to pick me up after school. The park where Dad taught me to ride a bike, only to get distracted by a call halfway through. The same corner where Danielle once left me stranded after promising she'd give me a ride home. It all felt smaller now. Not just physically, but emotionally. Like the illusion had finally cracked. I didn't hate my family. That's the tricky part. It would have been easier if I did. If they were cartoon villains, evil and heartless. But they weren't. They were just selfish, entitled. And I'd fed that entitlement with a smile and a monthly transfer for so long that they couldn't even recognize their own dependency as toxic. When I got back to my place, I found an envelope slipped under the door. It was handwritten, Mom's cursive, uneven and shaky. "Nathan, we made mistakes. I see that now. But threatening the house? That's going too far. Danielle is already looking for somewhere else to stay. Your father can barely sleep. Please, let's meet. No accusations. Just family. Love. Mom." I stared at the note for a long time. It was the first time in years she'd said, "We made mistakes," instead of, "Well, you're just sensitive." But even then, I couldn't help but notice how the letter was framed. Not, "We're sorry." Not, "We shouldn't have used you." Just a plea to stop hurting them. Not once did she ask how I was doing. Not once did she mention the fact I'd single-handedly kept them afloat while sacrificing my own savings, relationships, and mental health. Still, I agreed to meet. At a neutral place, a coffee shop halfway between my place and theirs. Public enough that no one could raise their voice. We met the next morning. My dad was already seated when I arrived, arms crossed, lips in a tight line. He didn't look mad. He looked defensive, like he was preparing for war, not reconciliation. Mom arrived 2 minutes later, flustered and overdressed. Like she thought pretending everything was fine would make it true. "Nathan," she said, sliding into the booth. "Thank you for coming." I gave a nod. "I'm here to listen." Dad cut right to it. "You want to sell the house?" "I want to claim what's legally mine," I said calmly. "If that leads to a sale, so be it." "You can't possibly want that," Mom said, leaning forward. "This is your home." "No," I corrected. "It was my home. Until it became your fallback plan. Until every interaction with me revolved around what I could give." Mom looked hurt. "We never met." "But you did," I said. "When I lost my job last year, I asked for a break. You told me I'd figure it out. When I helped you keep the house after the partner incident, no one even said thank you. Not once. And now, after forgetting my birthday, you invited me to Dad's party for $2,500. That was Danielle's idea," Mom blurted. "She handled the invites." Dad shot her a glare, but I just laughed quietly. "So now it's her fault." "Of course." I worked my whole life, Dad muttered, finally looking at me. I made mistakes, yeah, but I built that house. You think you can just take it from us because you found some loophole in a trust. I leaned in. This isn't about a loophole. It's about boundaries and consequences. Come on, Mom pleaded. We're a family. We can't survive without each other. I let that line hang in the air. We can't survive without each other. The irony practically choked me. Because I had survived. I'd survived being their emotional crutch, their financial bailout, their invisible support system. But now that I stopped holding them up, the structure was crumbling, and they were calling it my fault. I slid a folder across the table. Inside, a breakdown of every bill I'd paid since 2022. Mortgage, insurance, cable, home repairs, the new roof, even groceries, when Danielle had Venmo'd me last minute during one of Mom's impromptu dinner parties. The total? $74,380. Mom gasped. This can't be right. It is, I said flatly. I kept receipts. Dad flipped through the pages, face reddening. I never asked you to do this, he mumbled. You never had to, I said. Because you expected me to. Silence followed. Thick, heavy, the kind of silence that presses into your chest. I'm not selling the house tomorrow, I continued. I haven't even made my final decision yet. But I want you to understand something. I'm not coming back to this role. Not ever again. I'm not your emergency fund. I'm not your forgotten son. I'm not a silent sponsor for Danielle's cable package. If you want to repair this family, start by seeing me as a person, not a paycheck. I stood. They didn't stop me. They didn't argue. As I walked out, I glanced back. My parents sat there, hunched over the folder like it held their future. And maybe it did. Because what none of them knew, not yet, was that I'd been speaking with a realtor. Not to sell the house. Not yet. But to appraise it. To understand its worth. Because maybe they needed to feel the weight of losing me. Not just as their financial safety net, but as their son, before they understood what they'd been taking for granted all this time. And I was done waiting for them to catch up. I didn't expect them to call that night. But they did. First it was Mom, then Dad. I let the phone ring out both times. I had nothing else to say, at least not on the phone, not anymore. The truth had been laid out. Every dollar, every unspoken favor, every part of myself I'd stretched too thin for a family that forgot I was more than a convenience. They didn't call again after that, and I was fine with it. The following week, I got the property appraisal in the mail. Neat little envelope, crisp letterhead. The house was worth more than I expected. The market had jumped again. It stung, for a moment, knowing how much I'd invested into that place, emotionally and financially. But the sting didn't last long. Because I also knew this. It wasn't my home anymore. It was just a building full of memories I didn't need to carry. A few days after the appraisal arrived, I got an email from the trust attorney. Dear Nathan, following your request, and under your rights as secondary beneficiary, you are entitled to initiate a petition action or propose a buyout offer. Please advise how you wish to proceed. I stared at the email for a while. I thought about Danielle, about how she'd once promised to split rent with me when I got my first job, and then moved back home 3 weeks later because living with roommates gave her anxiety. I thought about Dad, how he'd given me a firm handshake and a nod at graduation, then left the ceremony early to meet an old friend for lunch. No hug, no photo. And I thought about Mom, how she used to tell me I was the glue that held the family together, then stopped calling unless something needed fixing. They hadn't held me together. They'd pulled me apart, bit by bit. So I replied to the attorney. Initiate buyout proceedings. I want their formal offer in writing within 10 business days. If they decline, move forward with a petition and sale. Less than 48 hours later, my phone lit up again. This time, Danielle, you're seriously going through with this? You're going to kick us out of our home. I didn't respond. Danielle texted again, don't do this. Please. I'm looking for jobs. I'll help. I'll even start paying for groceries. You don't need to be like this. Still, I said nothing. Danielle texted, you're just bitter we forgot your birthday. And there it was. Not a single sentence about the years I supported them. Not a single acknowledgement of the time, the sacrifice, the silence I lived in so they could keep pretending everything was fine. Just that one line. So I blocked her. 10 business days passed. On day 11, I received a formal letter from their attorney. Our clients regret the misunderstanding and would like to propose a buyout in the amount of $19,000. Citing recent home expenses and financial limitations. I laughed. Out loud. $19,000. For half of a $400,000 house I helped keep afloat? That was their idea of making it right. I didn't respond to the letter. Instead, I greenlit the petition and sale. A judge would handle it now. If they couldn't afford to buy me out, the house would go on the market. Clean. Legal. Final. The backlash came quick. Posts on Facebook. A few cousins unfriended me. Some mutual family friends sent vague texts about how sad it is when families fall apart. I didn't answer any of them, because none of them had seen what I'd seen. None of them had been on the inside. I kept my head down, kept going to work, made my coffee every morning, started sleeping better. And for the first time in over a year, I didn't feel the weight of anyone else's life on my chest. 3 months later, the house sold. It was a modest bidding war, nothing flashy, but enough to prove its value. After fees and closing costs, I walked away with just under $190,000. More than I'd ever had in my name at once. I didn't tell anyone. I didn't post about it. Didn't celebrate. Just quietly transferred the funds into a new savings account. Then I packed a weekend bag, got in my car, and drove north, into the hills, past the city limits, until the reception bars on my phone faded out and the silence turned clean. I rented a cabin for 4 days. No Wi-Fi, no calls, just trees, a lake, and myself. On the 3rd day, I took out an old notebook I hadn't touched in years, the one I used to write in during high school. Back when I thought I'd be a novelist, before I traded in words for wire transfers. And I wrote one sentence on the first page. You are not their lifeline anymore. I stared at it for a while. Then I kept writing. When I got home, there were no messages waiting. No missed calls. Just peace. Mom tried once, weeks later. Sent a message on a new number. We miss you. Please come for dinner. I didn't reply, because by then, I'd signed a lease on a new apartment. 2 bedrooms. A balcony. Bright sunlight in the mornings. Paid in full for the first 6 months up front. I bought myself a cake on move-in day. Chocolate, thick frosting, no candles. And I ate the whole damn thing. No one asked how I was doing. And honestly, I was fine with that. Because I finally had an answer to every time they'd used me, forgotten me, expected me to show up without thanks. The answer was simple. I'm done. My name's Aiden, I'm 33, and I don't usually go to family events anymore. Not because I hate my family, but because, over the years, I've learned how some of them, particularly on my dad's side, see me. And it's not exactly with warmth. Ever since I chose a different path in life, turning down law school, staying single, focusing on freelance writing instead of a real job, I've become the family outlier. The invisible one. The one people remember last when they're planning seating charts or sending out invites, if they remember me at all. Still, when I got the wedding invitation from my cousin Claire, something in me said I should go. Maybe I was being naive. Or maybe I was just curious. Curious to see if time had changed anything. Claire and I used to be close. When we were kids, she was the cousin I played hide-and-seek with at every barbecue, the one who'd sneak cupcakes with me before dinner, the one who once covered for me when I broke Aunt Meredith's ugly porcelain goose. But ever since her mom, Meredith, started climbing the social ladder in her mid-40s, through fundraisers, church events, and whatever small-town politics could offer, Claire changed too. More curated. More careful about who she associated with. And I, with my thrift store wardrobe and unglamorous job, didn't fit the new aesthetic. Still, the invitation came. Cream envelope. Gold leaf lettering. Aiden Whitmore is cordially invited. I almost didn't go. But then again, I'd skipped the last 5 family events. Maybe this one would be different. So I bought a new jacket, picked out a tasteful wedding gift, a framed antique map of the place Claire and her fiancé got engaged, and drove 2 hours to the venue, a renovated countryside barn that looked like something out of a Pinterest board. The first red flag came when I checked in at the welcome table. The girl at the front, probably a friend of the bride, scanned the chart, frowned, and said, "Oh, can I just double-check something?" She ducked behind the table and whispered something to another girl. They both glanced at me, then at the chart, and then back to me. One of them finally smiled, wide and forced. "We'll have someone walk you to your seat." Walk me to my seat? I didn't need an escort. But before I could argue, this young guy in a dress shirt, maybe a cousin I hadn't seen in a decade, gestured toward the far end of the venue. And I mean far. Past the dance floor, past the buffet table, past even the bar. We went through a side hall where a staff member was wheeling out a mop bucket and turned into a little alcove with two circular tables set for four each. One of them was directly beside the restroom door, so close that I could hear the whoosh of the automatic toilet flush every couple minutes. My name was scribbled on a folded place card, misspelled, by the way, and taped to the table with what looked like packing tape. I blinked. This can't be right. The guy just shrugged. This is what's on the chart. Right by the bathroom? I asked. He didn't even pretend to be apologetic. We had to prioritize important guests. That voice didn't come from him. It came from behind me. I turned, and there she was, Aunt Meredith. Sleek dress, up too tight enough to make her look perpetually surprised, lipstick 2 shades too dark for the occasion. She was smiling, but it wasn't a warm smile. It was the kind you reserve for people you're pretending to tolerate. "Excuse me," I said. "You didn't RSVP until the last minute," she said, already waving it off like it wasn't even a conversation worth having. "We weren't even sure you'd show. Besides, this section is fine. It's not like you're staying for the whole thing, right?" I didn't answer. I just looked at the card again, then at the rest of the room. Everyone else, family, friends, even some guy I vaguely remembered Claire once calling the guy who fixed our garage door, had seats near the head table or on the main floor. I didn't recognize the people seated next to me. One of them was a distant relative on the groom's side. The other two were clearly not fluent in English and seemed just as confused by their placement as I was. I stood there in silence for a beat. Then I turned to the seating chart near the front, the one decorated with faux flowers and calligraphy. I scanned for my name. Found it. Or rather, found where it used to be. Aidan Whitmore, Table 7, had been neatly crossed out in pen. The ink still looked fresh. I took a photo of it. Just because. "Meredith," I said slowly, trying not to raise my voice. "Why was my name crossed off the seating chart?" She blinked, but only for a second. "Well, like I said, we assumed you weren't coming. You're always off, doing whatever it is you do. Writing? Blogging? That sort of thing." "You mean working?" I said, more to myself than her. She actually had the audacity to shrug. "We didn't think you'd actually come. That was it. No apology. No awkward attempt to smooth it over. Just casual dismissal, as if my presence wasn't just unimportant, it was inconvenient." I looked down at the wrapped gift I'd carried in, held it a little tighter, then back at her. "You thought right," I said. I didn't shout. I didn't curse. I didn't throw the gift or make a scene. I just turned around, walked back across the venue, past the bar, past the buffet, past the table where Claire was laughing with her new in-laws, and kept walking until I hit the exit. Not a single person stopped me. Not one cousin called out. Not even Claire. When I got to my car, I sat in the driver's seat with the wrapped gift still in my lap, just breathing, trying to convince myself I hadn't made a mistake by coming. But the truth was, I didn't feel embarrassed. I felt clear. Like someone had finally pulled the curtain all the way back on a show I'd been pretending wasn't rigged. I hadn't even started the engine when my phone buzzed. It was a message from my younger cousin Ellie, who hadn't been at the wedding she was studying abroad. "Hey, just saw your tag on that wedding picture. So glad you went. How was it?" I didn't reply to Ellie's message right away. Instead, I stared at that photo under the wedding hashtag a while longer. Zoomed in. There I was, blurry and barely in frame, next to a bathroom door with a yellow, out-of-order sign taped across it. Classy. I could practically hear Meredith's voice in my head. We had to prioritize important guests. A chill went through me, but not from embarrassment, more like clarity, like snapping awake from a long nap and finally seeing daylight. I thought about all the things I'd quietly done for this family over the years. The tech help. The free website edits for Uncle Jim's landscaping business. Ghostwriting my aunt's community column once when she panicked before a deadline. Editing Claire's grad school application essay at 2 a.m. when she couldn't figure out how to cut 300 words. Not one of them had said thank you. Not really. It was always assumed I had time, that I wasn't doing real work. And today just proved it, sidelined, literally, to a corner with a flush every 3 minutes. So I made a decision, not in anger, not even out of spite. I just stopped pretending. I drove home in silence. Didn't even turn the radio on. When I got home, I unwrapped the wedding gift. The antique map was beautiful, mounted in a mahogany frame with hand-calligraphed tags of the couple's names. It had taken me weeks to find it, weeks more to get it customized. I stared at it for a moment, then hung it in my hallway. The next day, I got a text from Claire. Not a thank you. Not even a sorry you got stuck in the back. Just, hey, did you end up leaving early? Thought we saw you come in. I didn't respond. 2 days later, another text. We didn't get your gift, but maybe it's in the mail? No pressure, lol, still didn't respond. But the real fallout started a week later when Meredith called me directly, which she hadn't done in, 3 years? I let it ring to voicemail. Then she called again. I picked up the third time, out of curiosity more than anything. Aiden, she said immediately, we need to talk. I didn't say anything. Just let her sit in the silence. Well, she continued, her voice falsely cheerful. Claire's trying to finalize thank you cards, and we noticed we didn't have your name on the gift list. There must have been a mix-up with the seating chart, but don't worry, we can fix it in the final draft. I exhaled slowly. There wasn't a mix-up, I said flatly. Pause. Excuse me. You crossed my name off the chart. I saw it. And you made sure I was sitting next to a restroom. You told me to my face that you didn't think I'd come. Aiden, she said sharply, her warmth gone in an instant. You're being overly sensitive. It was a wedding. Things get messy. We had to make adjustments. Honestly, it's not like you're even close with Claire anymore. I interrupted. Until she started treating me like an obligation. There was another pause, this one longer. Well, she snapped, dropping the pretense. Claire said she was disappointed you left without saying goodbye. It made things awkward when people started asking where you were. Then maybe she should have invited me like I mattered. I don't appreciate this tone, she said. And I don't appreciate being treated like a ghost who only exists when you need a free favor, I said, calm but firm. I was there. I was willing to show up. But that's over now. Are you really withholding the gift over a seating arrangement? I almost laughed. It's not about the gift. It's about how little you think of me until you need something. That map is hanging in my hallway now. Looks great, by the way. You're being selfish, she hissed. Claire was hurt. No, I said. Claire was caught. And now you're scrambling to make it look like this wasn't deliberate. Click. I hung up. Didn't wait for a reply. Over the next few weeks, the group chats got quieter. I noticed I was removed from one. Then another. No more forwarded baby photos or recipe chain texts. Not that I missed them. I spent the time focusing on work, launching a side project I'd kept on the back burner for years. I picked up new clients. Built something of my own, slowly but steadily. But drama has a way of circling back. About a month later, I got a call from my cousin Ellie, the one studying abroad. She'd finally come back and had been catching up on everything. What happened at the wedding? She asked, halfway between concern and disbelief. I told her the short version. No ranting. No embellishing. Just the facts. She was silent for a long beat. Then she said, they were awful for that. I'm so sorry. You know Claire made it sound like you bailed just to be dramatic? That you walked out without saying anything and ruined the pictures. She already had someone take me out of them, I said. Ellie didn't respond right away, but I could hear her breathing sharp, angry. Then she muttered, they don't get to erase you. We didn't talk long, but after that call, something shifted. Slowly, messages started coming in, not from Meredith, not from Claire, but from people I hadn't expected. Distant relatives, family friends, even Claire's younger brother, who said, I always wondered why they treated you like that. Now I know. But the real twist? Last week, Meredith reached out again, this time by email. Long-winded, overly polite. She wrote about misunderstandings, familial bonds, and how holding on to grudges only poisons the well. She said Claire was devastated over the fallout, and they hoped I'd consider joining them for Thanksgiving so we can make amends and put this behind us. The last line made me stop cold. And if possible, please bring your camera gear. We'd love your help with some family photos. That's when I knew they hadn't changed. Not really. I stared at that email for a long time, rereading it like it might shift into something more honest if I just gave it enough chances. But the words stayed the same, delicate phrasing, sugary regret, and underneath it all, the same entitled undertone. I recognized the tactic. Meredith was trying to reset the narrative. Not because she was sorry, but because the fallout was inconveniencing her. Her precious image as the gracious matriarch was cracking, and I wasn't playing along. And then there was that line again, please bring your camera gear. That told me everything I needed to know. That after all this, I was still a utility to them. A prop. A button they could press to get a service, and then store away when the performance was over. I didn't reply right away. I wasn't even sure if I wanted to. But something about how calculated it was, how easily they expected me to just fall back in line, made me realize this wasn't just about me. They'd been doing this for years. To me, to others, to anyone who didn't meet the family mold or couldn't serve a purpose in their curated little social theater. So I decided if they wanted a performance, I'd give them one. I called Ellie first. What would happen, I asked, if I showed up to Thanksgiving? She laughed, then paused. Are you actually thinking about it? I'm not going to eat their turkey, I said. But I'm thinking of giving them something to chew on. She was quiet for a second. Okay, what's the plan? I bring my camera, I said, just like they asked. But I bring something else, too. The week before Thanksgiving, I spent hours combing through old photos. Family gatherings, birthday parties, weddings, holidays. Every time I'd brought my camera, I had documented everything. Not just the staged smiles, but the quiet corners, too. The awkward glances. The eye rolls. The whispered jabs when someone walked away. And most of all, the things they probably forgot I even captured. I compiled it all. A digital archive, carefully labeled and timestamped, all backed up 3 different ways. But I didn't stop there. I recorded voice memos. I took screenshots of old texts. I wrote a letter, not for them, but for me, detailing every little slight, every "you probably won't come," every "it's just a joke." Every time I swallowed disrespect and tried to keep peace because it was family. Then I made a slideshow. Not the kind you play before carving a turkey. This one had context, receipts, commentary, a beginning, middle, and end. And I didn't make it petty, I made it unavoidable. This wasn't revenge, not yet. It was exposure, truth, packaged in the thing they valued most, presentation. When Thanksgiving finally came around, I loaded my car with my camera gear, just as requested, and drove to the same house I used to visit as a kid, back when Claire still liked cartoons and Aunt Meredith wasn't too good to serve her own guests. I arrived right on time. Meredith answered the door in a turtleneck and pearls, all smiles like nothing had happened. Aiden, so glad you made it. We're just getting started. I held up my gear case, brought the camera. She touched my shoulder lightly, ushering me in like a guest of honor. Perfect. We've been waiting for someone to take a big family shot in front of the fireplace. As I stepped into the foyer, I noticed something new. A printed seating chart for dinner, nothing fancy, just a sheet in a gold frame by the entry table. I glanced at it. My name was there this time. But instead of relief, I just felt amused. Like they thought that would fix it. The house was warm and filled with noise. Laughter. Clinking glasses. The smell of stuffing and honey-glazed ham. Claire caught my eye from across the room and gave me a half smile, half shame, half diplomacy. I nodded, but said nothing. After dinner, during that golden hour when everyone was full and mildly buzzed and their guard was down, Meredith called out, "Okay, everyone. Time for the fireplace photo. Aiden, sweetie, can you get set up?" I nodded, calm, and began unpacking the tripod. "Where should we stand?" someone asked. "Right there," I said, pointing to the fireplace. "But before we start, there's a quick video I wanted to share." "Oh." Meredith blinked. "I put together a little surprise," I said, moving to the TV and plugging in my laptop. "A compilation of family memories. Figured it might be nice to reflect before we freeze for a picture." She hesitated. "Well, we don't want to take too long. It's only 8 minutes," I said. "Give or take." They all agreed. Why not? Everyone loves nostalgia, right? I pressed play. At first, it was nostalgic. Childhood photos. Laughter. Family cookouts. But then came the transitions. The careless remarks. The exclusion. The moments most people didn't realize had been recorded. Claire joking that I was the backup plan if someone cancels. Meredith referring to me at a wedding as filler for the B-list. Old messages dismissing my presence, one after another. The room started shifting. Postures stiffened. Smiles faded. Some people looked uncomfortable. A few looked outright angry, not at me, but at what they saw. What they hadn't known or hadn't thought mattered. At minute 7, it got quiet. Dead quiet. And then I ended the video with one last image, the wedding seating chart, my name crossed out. And the caption below it, "You didn't think I'd actually come. You were right. I won't again." I shut the laptop, folded it away, looked up. No one spoke. The silence in the room was deafening. The kind of silence that doesn't ask for a pause, it demands a reckoning. My hands were steady as I packed up the laptop. I didn't scan the room for reactions. I didn't need to. I felt them. The shift in air. The tension pressing down on the shoulders of everyone present. Claire stood frozen beside her husband, her glass trembling slightly in her hand. Meredith's mouth opened, then shut. Twice. She looked like someone trying to swallow something bitter without water. Her husband, my Uncle Stuart, was pale, his expression caught between shame and fury, like he'd just realized the whole family had been caught on security cam footage robbing a church. I slid the laptop into my bag, zipped it shut, and finally looked up. Meredith was the first to recover, though barely. "That was inappropriate," she said, her voice hoarse and clipped. "I don't know what point you were trying to prove, Aiden, but this was supposed to be a holiday." I tilted my head slightly. "That was the point. I mean, ambushing us with personal moments, out of context? You're twisting things," she snapped. Her voice was rising now, trying to rally the crowd back to her side. "You took things we said years ago." "I didn't twist anything," I said, calm as ever. "I just showed you what you said when you thought I didn't matter enough to hear it." Claire stepped forward now. "Aiden, I'm sorry you felt excluded." "I was excluded," I interrupted, my voice firmer now. "That wasn't a feeling. That was a fact. You crossed my name off the chart. You sat me by the bathroom. Your mother told me to my face that I wasn't important enough to be there. And instead of an apology, I got an email asking me to bring my camera. That shut her up." Someone on the other side of the room cleared their throat, and Patricia, maybe. "Well, maybe we could all just take a breath." "No," I said, standing tall. "This breath? I've taken it. For years. I've taken it through skipped birthdays, through group chats I was always left out of, through favors asked without thanks, through every time I showed up and was treated like a misfit plus one at my own family's table. I'm done holding it." Ellie was standing in the corner, her face flushed but proud. She looked like she wanted to applaud, but she stayed still, watching. Meredith scoffed. "So this is revenge? You humiliate us in our own home. And for what? Because we didn't roll out a red carpet every time you walked in." "No," I said. "This wasn't revenge. It was acknowledgement. And trust me, humiliation would have looked a lot different. If I wanted revenge, Meredith, I wouldn't have given you the chance to sit through it privately." Her jaw clenched. I let that linger for a moment. Then, I picked up my gear and looked toward the door. "Wait," Claire said suddenly, stepping forward. "Aiden, please. Just don't go like this. I didn't know it hurt you that much." I paused, turned to her. "That's the problem, Claire," I said softly. "You didn't know, because you never cared to ask. And every time I stayed quiet, I thought maybe I was overreacting. But now I see it clearly. You all just got used to the version of me that tolerated being treated like I was expendable." A breath hitched in her throat, and for a second, I saw a flash of something genuine. Regret, maybe, or just discomfort at being called out in front of people she wanted to impress. But it didn't change anything. "I'm not coming to Christmas," I said, "or Easter, or weddings. I'm not going to be the guy in the back row with the camera and the smile. I'm done being the footnote in a family that only remembers me when they need something. You had your chance. You burned it." With that, I turned and walked to the front door. I could feel the stairs burning into my back, but I didn't flinch. I opened the door, stepped into the crisp November air, and closed it behind me without another word. I didn't drive off immediately. I sat in the car for a bit, watching as the porch light flickered and shadows moved behind the curtains. I half expected someone to come after me, to stop me, but no one did. And that silence, too, told me everything I needed to know. I went home. Ellie texted me an hour later. "That was legendary. I wish I had filmed their faces." I smiled, replied with a simple, "They wanted a camera." I brought one. Weeks passed. Thanksgiving came and went. I wasn't tagged in any photos. I wasn't mentioned in the group chat, at least, not the one I was still in. Then, one by one, I noticed I was removed from those two. Quietly. No announcement. Just gone. And I didn't care. What surprised me, though, were the messages that did come in. A second cousin I hadn't spoken to in years reached out. "Hey man, just wanted to say I saw the video. Someone shared it. I felt the same way around them. Thanks for saying what I never could." A family friend messaged me privately. "I wish I had your guts. They've treated my son like garbage for years because he's different. Thank you." Even Uncle Jim, of all people, the guy who once told me I'd regret not man ing up and going corporate, sent a 3-sentence email that ended with, "I was wrong about you. You've got more spine than the lot of us." But the most surprising message of all came about a month later. From Claire. "I've been thinking about what you said. A lot. I'm not proud of how I acted or how I let Mom run everything. I just wanted to keep the peace. But maybe the peace wasn't worth keeping. I don't expect you to forgive me. But I'm sorry. I didn't reply for a long time. I thought about what forgiveness would mean, whether it was for her or for me. I didn't feel hatred toward her, not anymore. Just distance, like someone you used to know in a different lifetime. Eventually, I wrote back, "Thank you. I mean that. I hope you mean it too." That was it. No reconciliation, no dramatic reunion, just a quiet acknowledgement. The kind I'd been denied for years. Today, the map still hangs in my hallway. Every time I pass it, I smile. Not because of the wedding, but because it reminds me of the moment I finally stopped apologizing for existing in someone else's shadow. I built new traditions. I spent Christmas in the mountains with friends, cooked my own turkey, toasted a chosen family instead of tolerated obligation. And for once, I didn't feel like I was missing anything. Sometimes, people ask me if I regret it, calling them out, walking away. I don't. Because in the end, I didn't burn the bridge. I just refused to keep rebuilding one they set on fire over and over again. And when I finally walked off it, I realized something. There was solid ground waiting on the other side. My name is Michael, and I'm 24 years old. For as long as I can remember, my family has revolved around one person, my older brother, Nathan. He was the golden child, the one who could do no wrong. If he got a C in school, it was the teacher's fault. If I got an A-, my parents would shake their heads and tell me I wasn't living up to my potential. That's the rhythm my life always followed. Nathan shining in the spotlight while I was shoved into the shadows, expected to quietly make do with whatever scraps of attention were left over. I grew up understanding that in our house, love wasn't something shared equally. It was a currency my parents invested entirely into Nathan. The first memory that still stings was when I was about 12. I had been saving allowance money for months to buy a new set of art supplies. Drawing was my escape, my little corner of happiness. But one morning, I went to grab my jar of bills and coins, and it was gone. My mom casually told me at dinner that Nathan needed some extra lunch money, and that she'd used mine because, in her words, "You'll get over it faster." I remember sitting there in silence, the spaghetti on my plate going cold, realizing that in this family, my wants were always negotiable, but his were sacred. That night, I lay awake, staring at the ceiling, promising myself that one day, I'd find a way to make all of this mean something. That my effort, my patience, my endurance wouldn't go unnoticed forever. Years later, the pattern never changed. It only grew sharper. By the time Nathan turned 18, my parents practically built his life for him. They paid for his driving lessons, helped him get a job through one of Dad's old friends, even gave him their old car. Meanwhile, when I asked if I could sign up for an after-school tutoring program to prep for college scholarships, my mom frowned and said, "We can't afford luxuries like that." Luxuries. That word burned into me. My education, my future, was considered a luxury, while Nathan's every whim was a necessity. Then came the day that defined the rest of my life. I was 17, just about to graduate high school. I had gotten into a decent college, and though my parents never offered much support, I thought I could rely on the savings account that my grandparents had started for me when I was a baby. They used to tell me, every time they visited, that this account was for Michael's education, no matter what. Over the years, I'd heard my parents mention it too. Always vaguely, always dismissively, but it was the only financial security I thought I had. That fund was supposed to be mine, my ticket out. But when I brought up tuition at dinner one night, my dad exchanged a look with my mom. That look told me everything before he even opened his mouth. "We had to use the money," he said flatly. My fork froze in midair. "What do you mean you used it?" My chest felt like it was collapsing inward. My mom jumped in, her voice calm like she was explaining something obvious to a child. "Your brother needed a reliable car to commute to work. We couldn't let him fail. You're smart, Michael. You'll find a way to make it without the savings." Nathan needed it more. The words echoed in my head. Nathan needed it more. My college fund, years of careful saving and promises from my grandparents, gone, converted into shiny metal and leather seats parked in our driveway. That night, Nathan stood proudly by his new car, grinning like a king. My parents fussed over him, taking photos, telling him how proud they were. I stood on the porch, my acceptance letter folded in my pocket, wondering how I was supposed to walk miles to work while they celebrated the theft of my future. The months that followed were brutal. I picked up shifts at a local diner, sometimes walking 40 minutes in the rain just to clock in. I watched Nathan drive past me more than once, music blasting, windows down, not even slowing enough to acknowledge me. Sometimes I'd get home late at night and see him tossing his keys on the kitchen counter, complaining about how annoying it is to pay for gas. My parents would nod sympathetically, pulling bills from their wallets to cover him, while I slipped off to bed with blistered feet and aching legs. The bitterness dug deep into me, but so did determination. I couldn't collapse. I couldn't let this be the end of my story. That was when I learned how to endure. Every step I walked to work, every hour I studied under flickering diner lights after shifts, every time I smiled at rude customers just to keep my paycheck, it all layered into something heavier, something sharper. I was carrying not just my dreams, but a quiet, seething anger. My parents thought they had robbed me of a future, but what they really did was light a fire I refused to let die. And then, years later, everything changed. The years after high school were some of the hardest of my life, but they also shaped me more than I ever thought possible. I worked doubles at the diner and picked up odd jobs anywhere I could. Landscaping, delivering groceries, cleaning offices, I did it all. Meanwhile, Nathan cruised around town in that shiny car bought with my future, posting pictures on social media about hard work paying off. The irony never failed to make me laugh bitterly under my breath. But if there's one thing I learned, it's that silence can be powerful. I didn't scream, didn't argue, didn't let them see me break. I let them believe I was defeated, when in reality, I was building something in secret. But while I was clawing my way through those early years, the favoritism at home only grew sharper, cutting deeper every time I visited. My parents liked to act as though Nathan's success was a shared family achievement, and my struggles were solely my own fault. I remember one night when I came home after a 12-hour shift smelling like fryer grease and coffee. Nathan was lounging on the couch, scrolling through his phone, while Mom fussed over him with a plate of food. Dad looked me up and down as I walked in, exhausted, and said, "Michael, maybe if you were more like your brother, you wouldn't be working yourself to death." Nathan chuckled without even looking up. I bit my tongue so hard I tasted iron, but I didn't say a word. There were countless small cuts like that. At family dinners, conversation always revolved around Nathan, his job, his car, his future plans. If I tried to share something, Mom would wave her hand and say, "We'll talk about that later." Later never came. On birthdays, Nathan got gifts wrapped in glossy paper, expensive headphones, new clothes, gadgets. When it was my turn, I got socks, maybe a cheap wallet, and always the phrase, "We're saving money these days, you understand." But the worst came during my second year of college. Yes, I found a way to get there despite them. I had scraped together enough scholarships, grants, and loans to enroll at a state school, balancing classes with brutal work hours. One weekend, I came home to find Nathan proudly announcing that Mom and Dad had co-signed a loan for him so he could start his own business. A car detailing shop, of all things. He'd been watching YouTube tutorials for months and suddenly fancied himself an entrepreneur. I remember sitting there, clutching the strap of my worn-out backpack, listening to Dad say, "Sometimes you have to take risks for the child who's going places." That sentence nearly broke me. The child who's going places. I had been killing myself trying to make something of my life, and yet in their eyes, Nathan was the only one worth gambling on. That night, I went back to campus and studied until dawn, tears blurring the pages of my textbooks. I swore to myself, again, that one day they'd regret every word, every choice that painted me invisible. The tension didn't just stop with favoritism. It spilled into outright manipulation. During breaks, when I came home, my parents would guilt-trip me about not contributing enough money to the household. "Nathan has expenses," Mom would say, "and you've always been so independent. Can't you help out a little more?" It baffled me how they could look me in the eyes and ask for money, knowing I was drowning in debt and working 2 jobs, while Nathan burned through cash on business ideas and late-night parties. Once, they even asked if I could put my name down on a credit card for Nathan to build his credit. I laughed right in their faces and walked out, but inside, I felt sick at how shameless they had become. The more they tried to pull me back into their orbit, the more distance I put between us. Phone calls went unanswered. Holidays, I made excuses to stay on campus. I focused on my work, my studies, my slow but steady climb upward. I told myself that success would be my revenge, but at night, lying awake in my cramped dorm, I couldn't shake the anger that simmered beneath everything. I didn't just want to succeed. I wanted them to see it, to choke on it, to realize they had gambled away the one child who had actually been fighting for something real. And yet, the deeper I pulled away, the harder they pushed. My parents started showing up unannounced at my apartment near campus, bringing food containers with Nathan's leftovers as if that would lure me back. They'd lecture me about families sticking together, while simultaneously reminding me how much they had sacrificed for Nathan. At one point, Mom even tried to guilt me by saying, "We wouldn't have been able to get him that car if you hadn't been so understanding." Understanding. That was her word for it. As if I had agreed to let them rip the rug out from under me. By the time I turned 21, I had stopped seeing them altogether unless I had no choice. I graduated quietly, without telling them the date of the ceremony, and when I got my first job offer, I celebrated with friends instead of family. But the tension was always there, hanging over me like a storm cloud. I knew that one day, they'd come back around, not with apologies, but with expectations. That's the thing about people like my parents. They don't see betrayal when they commit it. They only see opportunity when they think you've risen high enough to be useful again. And I was right. That day came sooner than I expected. It started with a phone call. The phone call came on a rainy Tuesday night, just as I was wrapping up a late shift at the office. I was 23 then, only a year into my first real job after college. It wasn't glamorous, but it paid decently, and I was finally starting to feel the ground steady beneath me. My phone buzzed in my pocket, and when I saw Mom on the screen, my gut twisted. I hadn't spoken to her in months, and calls from my parents were never good news. Against my better judgment, I answered. "Michael." Her voice came, sugary sweet in a way that immediately put me on edge. "It's been too long. How are you?" I gave a short, clipped reply. "Busy." "What's going on?" There was a pause, the kind that told me she was gearing up for something. Then she sighed dramatically. "It's about Nathan. He's in a bit of trouble. You know how hard he's been working on his business, right?" I almost laughed out loud. Hard work? The last I'd heard, his car detailing shop was bleeding money, and he'd been bragging online about weekend trips to Vegas. But I bit back the comment, letting her continue. "He just needs a little help, honey. The bank won't extend him any more credit, and your father and I have already put so much into him. We thought, since you're doing well now, you could step in, just until he gets back on his feet." I stopped walking, the rain dripping off my jacket as her words sank in. They wanted me, the son they'd robbed blind, to bail Nathan out. My throat tightened, but I kept my voice even. "No, I can't do that." There was silence, then a sharp edge in her tone. "Michael, he's your brother. Family helps family." I hung up without another word. My hands were shaking, not just from anger, but from the deep ache of realization. They hadn't changed at all. In their eyes, I wasn't a son. I was a resource, a backup plan for Nathan's failures. I thought that would be the end of it, but I underestimated just how far they would go. A few weeks later, I came home to my apartment after a long day to find an envelope slipped under my door. Inside was a letter from the bank. At first, I thought it was junk mail, but when I read closer, my stomach dropped. It was a notice about a loan, one I had never applied for. A loan in my name. Panic set in. I called the bank immediately, demanding answers. After a maze of transfers, a representative confirmed it. There was a loan application with my information, name, address, social security number, signed and approved. The funds had already been disbursed. My blood ran cold as the details unfolded. The listed co-signer was Nathan. I remember sitting on my couch in stunned silence, the letter trembling in my hands. My parents hadn't just asked me for help, they had taken it. Somehow, they had used my information, my identity, to secure money for Nathan. It was fraud. It was betrayal on a level I hadn't even thought they were capable of. The next day, I drove to their house, my chest tight with fury. When I walked in, Nathan was sprawled on the couch, watching TV with a smug grin. Mom was in the kitchen, humming like everything was normal. Dad looked up from his newspaper with that same dismissive expression I'd known my whole life. I slammed the letter on the table. "What is this?" My voice cracked with rage. Mom barely flinched. "Oh, that. Don't be so dramatic, Michael. It's just paperwork. Nathan needed a chance, and you weren't going to give it to him. You'll survive. You stole my identity." I spat. Dad folded the paper neatly and set it aside. "Watch your tone. We're your parents. We know what's best for the family." The room spun. Nathan chuckled from the couch. not even bothering to look at me. Relax, little brother. It's an investment. When my business takes off, you'll thank us. That was the breaking point. Every ounce of patience I had held on to, every quiet promise to myself to rise above, it all cracked wide open. My parents had crossed a line so deep, so vile, that there was no going back. They had stolen from me once with my college fund, but this was worse. This was them looking me in the eye and telling me I didn't matter, not as a son, not as a person, only as a tool to prop up their golden boy. I walked out of that house without another word, my heart pounding, my vision blurred with anger. But as the night wore on, something else began to burn beneath the fury. A clarity, a plan. If they wanted to use me like a resource, then they had no idea what kind of storm they had just unleashed. That was the night I stopped being their son in any sense of the word. That was the night I decided I wouldn't just get even. I would take back everything they had ever stolen from me, and more. And the first step was already forming in my mind. After that night, it felt like the floor had dropped out from beneath me. I didn't tell anyone at first, no friends, no coworkers. I carried the weight of that fraud notice like a secret stone in my chest, too heavy to share, too shameful to explain. Every time I checked the mail, there was another reminder, a bill, an interest statement, a warning about late payments I had never agreed to. My credit, something I had been carefully protecting while juggling scholarships and loans, was suddenly crumbling because of a decision I never made. The worst part wasn't even the money, it was the isolation. I couldn't shake the image of Nathan's smug grin, my parents' cold dismissal. The three people who were supposed to have my back had turned into the very people tearing my life apart. I'd walk to work some mornings, hands shoved deep in my pockets, wondering how much more I could take before I snapped. I had spent years swallowing their favoritism, their mockery, their constant reminders that I was the lesser son. But this was different. This wasn't just favoritism. This was sabotage. There were nights I didn't sleep at all. I'd sit at my desk, staring at spreadsheets from my job, trying to focus while my thoughts drifted back to the mess my parents had created. I'd wonder if I was doomed to spend my life cleaning up after Nathan's failures. Sometimes, I'd even question whether I was cursed somehow, born into a family that would rather break me than see me thrive. My grades, my work, my sacrifices, they never mattered to them. Only Nathan did. And yet, as the weight pushed me lower, something inside me hardened. If I couldn't rely on them, and by now, it was crystal clear that I never could, then I had to build something for myself, something untouchable. I started researching late into the night, not just how to dispute fraudulent loans and protect myself legally, but how to protect everything I was building. I met with a financial advisor from my company, framing my situation as a hypothetical, but absorbing every word about securing assets, establishing trusts, and shielding income. The more I learned, the more I realized that while my parents thought they had buried me, they had actually handed me the blueprint for freedom. Still, the immediate reality was harsh. I couldn't qualify for a decent apartment lease because of the loan. I had to keep my head down at work, terrified that if anyone dug into my credit, they'd assume I was reckless. For a few months, I lived in a crumbling studio with mold on the ceiling and neighbors who fought loudly through paper-thin walls. Every morning, I woke up to the sound of sirens or slammed doors, and I dragged myself to the office with dark circles under my eyes. It felt like rock bottom, not the kind you hit once and recover from, but the kind that feels like home after a while. And yet, I didn't tell my parents I was struggling. That was part pride, part strategy. If they thought they had crushed me, let them believe it. Let them think I was still the quiet, compliant son they could exploit. In reality, every bill I paid off, every dollar I tucked away, was another brick in the wall I was building between myself and them. I avoided family gatherings entirely. When my mom called, I let it go to voicemail. When Dad sent terse texts like, "Call us, we need to talk about Nathan," I deleted them without replying. Nathan, of course, sent nothing at all. In his mind, I was already irrelevant, a stepping stone he had used and discarded. But while they saw me as weak, I was busy turning that weakness into something else. Every moment of silence I gave them was a moment I spent planning. One particularly low evening, I walked past a car dealership on my way home from work. The shiny vehicles gleamed under the lot lights, polished and perfect. For a second, I was 17 again, standing on the porch while my parents celebrated Nathan's brand new car. the one bought with my future. The memory stung, but it also sharpened me. I whispered under my breath, almost like a vow. One day, I'll have something you can't touch. And slowly, painfully, I began to carve that path. I picked up freelance work on top of my job, coding projects, data analysis gigs, anything I could get my hands on. I lived frugally, saving every cent, stashing money in accounts my parents didn't even know existed. My days blurred into long stretches of work, study, and survival, but with every passing week, I could feel the tide turning, even if just slightly. It was still rock bottom. I was exhausted, lonely, and shackled to debts I hadn't created, but it wasn't permanent. I had decided it wouldn't be. And though I hadn't figured out the how just yet, I knew one thing with absolute certainty. When the time came, when my parents inevitably returned to bleed me dry again, I wouldn't just say no. I would make them regret every single choice that had led us here. The thought of that revenge became the one spark that kept me moving, even in the darkest stretches. And then, just when I thought I could finally breathe again, something happened that changed everything. The turning point didn't come with fireworks or some dramatic windfall. It was quiet, almost unnoticeable at first. One morning, I woke up in that dingy studio apartment, looked around at the water-stained ceiling and the peeling paint, and realized something strange. I wasn't sinking anymore. I was treading water, yes, but the current wasn't dragging me under like before. My debts were slowly shrinking. My side jobs were stacking into real money. My credit dispute case was moving in my favor. For the first time in years, I felt like I wasn't drowning, I was climbing. I leaned harder into that momentum. My 9-to-5 job had started to notice the hours I poured in, and one of my managers pulled me aside after a big project and said, "Michael, you've got real potential. Have you ever thought about leadership?" I didn't say it out loud, but the question lit something in me. Leadership? Me, the invisible son, the one my family treated like an afterthought? That was the first time I realized I had something they couldn't take away. The respect of people who valued me for what I could do, not what I could provide for someone else. Within a year, I was promoted. My salary jumped, and with the promotion came more opportunities to network. I started attending industry events, shaking hands with people I never would have dreamed of meeting. Every time I walked into those rooms, I reminded myself, they don't know the boy whose parents stole his future. They only see Michael, the young professional who works hard, who delivers results, who belongs here. On the side, I kept building. The freelance projects that had once been my lifeline turned into something bigger. Word of mouth spread, clients referred me to other clients, and soon I had enough demand that I considered scaling it. I registered a small LLC, opened separate accounts, and started hiring part-time help. It was surreal. I had gone from barely keeping the lights on to managing a budding business, all without my family knowing a single detail. My living situation improved too. With my credit finally repairing and my savings growing, I moved out of that moldy studio and into a modest one-bedroom in a quiet part of the city. It wasn't luxurious, but it was mine, and it didn't smell like mildew or fried food from the neighbor's late-night cooking. I bought furniture that wasn't secondhand, decorated the walls with art I liked, and for the first time, I felt like I had a home. I would sit on my couch after work, laptop open as I managed projects for my side business, and think, this is the life they said I'd never have. Meanwhile, Nathan's life began unraveling in small, almost poetic ways. Word trickled back through mutual acquaintances. His business was failing, the loan money had dried up, and he'd started hopping between jobs. Every post on his social media grew more desperate, all bluster about new schemes that never went anywhere. My parents, of course, doubled down in their support. Every once in a while, I get a voicemail from my mom saying things like, "Your brother just needs time. Don't you remember how much we've always been there for you both?" I would listen to her words with a kind of detached fascination, as if she were talking about someone else's family. But the more my star rose, the more I prepared. I didn't just want success for myself, I wanted armor. I wanted to be untouchable, to ensure they could never again exploit me the way they had before. I set up my finances meticulously, multiple accounts, legal protections, contracts for my business that made it impossible for anyone to piggyback off my name without consequences. I began investing too, stocks, mutual funds, even a stake in a small startup run by a friend I trusted. Piece by piece, I was building something far larger than just a paycheck. And yet, I never flaunted it. To my family, I stayed silent. I answered fewer and fewer of their calls. I let them believe whatever story they wanted to tell themselves about me. Maybe that I was still struggling, maybe that I was scraping by. The less they knew, the better. Because deep down, I knew the day would come when they'd come knocking again. And this time, I wanted to be ready. I'll never forget the first moment I truly realized how much had changed. I was at a client dinner, an upscale place with white tablecloths and menus that didn't have prices listed. My boss introduced me as one of our rising stars to a table full of executives, and I shook hands with men and women whose signatures controlled millions. I smiled, confident, steady. That night, as I walked home through the city lights, I thought back to all those nights trudging home from the diner, feet blistered, watching Nathan drive by in that car bought with my stolen future. And the thought that struck me hardest wasn't bitterness. It was this: I had built more for myself, from nothing, than they had ever imagined possible. Still, the voice in the back of my head never let me forget. Success wasn't enough, not yet. Not when my parents had never apologized, never even admitted what they'd done. Not when Nathan still lounged in the wreckage of his failures, protected by the belief that someone would always clean up after him. And then, as if the universe had been waiting for the right moment, my parents reappeared in full force. They didn't just call this time. They showed up. It was a Saturday morning when they came. I had just poured myself a cup of coffee and was settling down to catch up on some project reports when there was a knock at the door. Not a polite knock either. Heavy, insistent, the kind that makes your stomach clench. I opened it, and there they were. My parents, standing side by side like some grim parade, with Nathan a step behind them, his hands shoved into his hoodie pocket and his eyes darting around like he couldn't even meet my gaze. For a long moment, none of us spoke. I just stared at them, the steam from my coffee rising between us. My mom finally broke the silence with a forced smile. "Michael, you look, well." Her voice cracked on the last word, and I noticed the lines on her face, deeper now, her eyes tired. My dad's jaw was tight, his expression a blend of pride and desperation. Nathan looked worse than both of them. Unshaven, his posture slumped, a shadow of the smug brother I'd once known. "What do you want?" I asked flatly. My mom flinched but pressed on. We need your help. Things have been difficult. Nathan's business, it didn't work out. And the house, we're behind on payments. The bank," she faltered, then tried again. "Michael, we know you're doing well now. We thought maybe you could help us get back on our feet, just until things stabilize." I took a slow sip of coffee, letting the silence stretch until it became almost unbearable. "No," I said simply, and started to close the door. But my dad jammed his hand against the frame. "Don't be like this," he snapped. "You wouldn't even be where you are without the sacrifices we made. We gave your brother a chance, and now it's your turn to give back to the family." The audacity almost made me laugh. They had stolen from me, sabotaged me, mocked me, and now they were framing it as sacrifice? I studied them carefully, noting every crack in their armor, every sign of fear and need. That was when it hit me. For the first time in my life, I wasn't the powerless one in this dynamic. They needed me. I didn't need them. I didn't let them in, but I didn't send them away immediately either. Instead, I let them talk, and talk they did. My mom begged, my dad barked, and Nathan, pathetically, mumbled about how things will turn around soon if only I could lend him some money as an investment. Every word they spoke was a revelation. They weren't just struggling. They were desperate. And desperation makes people sloppy. Over the following weeks, they kept reaching out. Texts, voicemails, even handwritten letters slipped under my door. Each one revealed more. The mortgage was months behind. Nathan's debts were piled so high that collectors were circling. My dad's retirement savings had been drained trying to plug holes. The picture was clear. The golden pedestal they'd built under Nathan had crumbled, and in the wreckage, they had nowhere else to turn but me. And here's the thing. I didn't just ignore them. I watched. I listened. I learned. I reached out quietly to some contacts I'd made in finance, asked a few hypothetical questions, and soon I had a detailed picture of exactly how deep their trouble went. Their house was teetering on foreclosure. Nathan's credit was worse than mine had ever been, and he had liens against his so-called business. They were cornered animals, and I was the one holding the door. At the same time, my own position was stronger than ever. My promotion at work had turned into a senior role, giving me influence and visibility. My side business was thriving, with contracts that secured steady income well beyond my salary. I had investments maturing, assets locked safely away, and legal protections in place. Financially, I was untouchable. Emotionally, I was colder than I'd ever been. They couldn't guilt me anymore, couldn't twist my sense of obligation. That part of me had died the night they stole my name for that fraudulent loan. The setup for revenge wasn't just about having money. It was about having power. For the first time in my life, I had both. They had taken everything from me once, but now they were standing at my door, empty-handed, begging for scraps. And I realized something that made my chest tighten with a strange, almost thrilling kind of clarity. I didn't just want to say no. I wanted them to feel what I had felt all those years ago. Powerless, small, disposable. But timing is everything, and I wasn't going to rush. If they wanted help, I would let them believe it was possible, just long enough to set the stage. Just long enough to make the fall hurt more. That was when I started planning in earnest, drawing up the outlines of something that would not only deny them what they wanted, but expose them for what they had done. Every insult, every theft, every betrayal, they had handed me the tools for this moment. And soon, very soon, I'd use them. Revenge, for me, wasn't about fire and chaos. It wasn't about screaming in their faces or demanding they pay me back dollar for what they stole. That would have been too easy, too loud. No, I wanted something quieter, something colder. The kind of revenge that lingers, that twists the knife slowly every time they think about me. I wanted them to understand, not in one furious outburst, but in the silence that followed, that they had destroyed the one bridge they could never rebuild. The first step was to let them think they still had a chance. When my parents showed up again a week later, I didn't slam the door in their faces this time. I invited them in. The look of relief on my mom's face almost made me laugh. They sat at my table, looking around my apartment with thinly veiled surprise. It wasn't extravagant, but it was neat, modern, and filled with things I'd worked for myself. My dad cleared his throat, his pride fighting against his desperation. "We knew you'd come around," he said, as though I had agreed to anything. I listened as they laid out their problems again. The overdue mortgage, the debt collectors, Nathan's failing ventures. They spoke as though all of it was just a temporary setback, something a family contribution could easily fix. Nathan finally piped up, his voice sharp with entitlement despite the bags under his eyes. "If you just cover the mortgage and help me restart the business, we'll be fine. It's an investment in the family." I let them talk, nodding occasionally, as though I was considering it. Then, with perfect calm, I said, "I'll think about it. But I need to see the paperwork. The mortgage, the debts, the business expenses. If I'm going to put money into this, I need full transparency." The relief on their faces was immediate. They agreed eagerly, promising to gather everything. My mom even touched my hand and whispered, "We knew you wouldn't abandon us." I smiled thinly, hiding the storm inside me. What they didn't realize was that I already had most of the information. Through contacts and careful research, I knew more about their finances than they thought possible. But asking for the paperwork wasn't about facts. It was about watching them hand me the rope they'd eventually hang themselves with. Over the next few weeks, they delivered stacks of documents. I took them politely, scanning each page as though I were genuinely considering helping. Behind closed doors, though, I compiled everything into a neat, devastating picture. Years of reckless spending, loans opened in my name, assets drained, all while Nathan burned through money on cars, parties, and empty ventures. They had destroyed themselves, and all I had to do was hold up the mirror. The moment came when they pressed me for an answer. We sat again at my kitchen table, the three of them looking at me like starving wolves waiting for meat. My dad leaned forward. "So, are you going to step up or not?" I opened a folder and slid the papers across the table. "Here's what I see," I said calmly. "You took my college savings and bought Nathan a car. You committed fraud by opening loans in my name. You've drained your retirement. Your house is on the edge of foreclosure, and Nathan owes more than he could pay back in 3 lifetimes. And now you want me to fix it." Their faces paled. Nathan tried to laugh it off, but the sound was weak, forced. My mom's hands trembled. My dad's jaw tightened, but even he couldn't mask the fear in his eyes. I leaned back, folding my arms. "Here's my decision. No, not a cent. You'll lose the house. Nathan will drown in his own debts. And you'll finally have to live with the consequences of every choice you made. The silence that followed was electric. My mom's eyes filled with tears, but I felt nothing. My dad started to protest, but I raised a hand to cut him off. Don't. You made your bed when you chose him over me every single time. You don't get to crawl back now. I stood, walked to the door, and held it open. Get out. They shuffled past me, broken in a way I had never seen before. Nathan muttered something under his breath, maybe an insult, maybe a plea, but I didn't care enough to listen. When the door shut behind them, I felt a calmness settle over me. It wasn't joy exactly. It was something sharper, cleaner. For once, I had the power, and I had wielded it with precision. But the true revenge wasn't just in saying no. It was in making sure they had no way to twist the narrative, no way to paint me as the ungrateful son. I had the documents, the proof of everything they'd done, and I knew exactly what to do with them. Because if they thought losing my help was the worst that could happen, they were about to learn how wrong they were. The fallout was quieter than I imagined, but far more devastating for them. I didn't need to raise my voice or slam my fist on a table. My proof did all the work for me. I started with the fraudulent loan they had taken out in my name. I filed a full report with the bank, attaching the paperwork they themselves had handed over to me. When the fraud investigator called for a follow-up, I answered every question calmly, providing signatures, dates, and even the voicemail my mom had left months earlier, practically admitting they just needed to help Nathan. The investigation moved faster than I expected. Within weeks, the bank cleared me of liability. My credit, my future, was safe. The loan, however, didn't just disappear. It shifted back to its origin, them. My parents and Nathan were now fully responsible for the debt they had tried to bury me under. Next came the mortgage. With the information I'd gathered, I quietly tipped off a legal aid office that specialized in foreclosure cases. I wasn't trying to save them. I wanted everything documented. Their reckless spending, their inability to pay, the fact that they had siphoned my savings into a car that Nathan had wrecked years earlier. The lawyers filed notices that became part of the public record. Anyone could now see just how badly they had mismanaged everything. Their respectable reputation in the neighborhood began to unravel overnight. And as for Nathan, his business debts caught up with him swiftly. Creditors began circling. I knew because one of them, recognizing my last name, accidentally contacted me first. I redirected them, of course, but not before forwarding them copies of the financial statements Nathan had so proudly shown me, claiming they were proof of his potential. With those documents, the creditors had everything they needed to press harder. The first real fallout came when my dad called me, voice shaking with rage. "You destroyed us," he shouted. "Do you have any idea what you've done?" I let him scream, then cut in with a voice as steady as stone. "No, Dad. You destroyed yourselves. I just stopped you from destroying me too." And I hung up. After that, the call stopped. Instead, I began hearing whispers from old neighbors and distant relatives. My parents had lost the house. Nathan had filed for bankruptcy. The family who once paraded their golden child around, mocking me as the lesser son, had become a cautionary tale in the community. Their downfall wasn't loud or dramatic. It was slow, humiliating, inescapable. Exactly the way I wanted it. Months later, I drove past their old house on a whim. It was empty, the windows dark, a foreclosure notice taped to the door. Nathan's car, the one they had stolen my college fund to buy, was gone too, probably repossessed years back. For a moment, I stood there on the sidewalk, staring at the place where so much of my pain had been born. And instead of bitterness, I felt something colder. Closure. I never saw them again after that. Not in person, at least. I moved forward with my life, my career, my business. The people around me respected me for who I was and what I'd built, not for what they could take from me. That was the sweetest victory of all. And every now and then, when I catch my reflection in the glass of a high-rise office building, I remember the boy walking miles to work while his brother drove by in a stolen future. That boy became a man who built his own path, brick by brick, while his so-called family collapsed under the weight of their choices. The last time my father's voice echoed in my head, shouting that I had destroyed them, I finally understood the truth. I hadn't destroyed them. I had simply stepped out of the shadow they forced me into and let them destroy themselves. It was one of those humid summer evenings where the air sticks to your skin like a second shirt, and even the mosquitoes seemed to move slower. My name's Nate. I'm 32 now, but back then, I was 23, barely scraping by with a cluttered suitcase of regrets and unfinished dreams. I'd flown home for a family barbecue in late July, the kind of event that, in theory, was supposed to bring everyone together. Hot dogs, loud uncles, and cheap plastic chairs sinking into the lawn. My older brother had just gotten promoted, my sister had announced her engagement on Facebook the night before, and my youngest sibling, my parents' golden child, was freshly accepted into some fancy pre-law program. Me? I was the one who booked the cheapest red-eye ticket back to a town I swore I'd outgrow. I remember stepping into that backyard and immediately feeling like a background character in my own family. Nobody looked surprised to see me. No hugs, just distracted nods and one offhand, "Oh, you made it," from my mom as she passed me a plate like she was handing it to a stranger in line. I told myself not to expect much. It was just a barbecue, not some grand reunion. But even that mindset didn't prepare me for what came next. It started with drinking. It always does, doesn't it? A few too many glasses and suddenly everyone thinks they're the star of a Netflix special. My dad stood in the middle of a circle of aunts, uncles, and neighbors, retelling the same old stories about how he coached my brother's high school baseball team to the playoffs, how my sister won that county science fair, how the youngest got a full ride. Then, right when I reached for the corn on the cob, he pointed over at me and said with a chuckle, "And that one, well, he's the one who'll never amount to anything." I froze. At first, I thought I'd misheard him. Maybe he meant it as a joke. But then my mom added, loud and clear, "We don't even count him anymore. 3 kids, not 4. Everyone laughed. Everyone. My uncle gave me a sympathetic glance, but didn't say a word. I just sat there, holding my paper plate with half a burger and a deviled egg, watching them pick me apart like I wasn't sitting 10 feet away. My cousin even leaned over to whisper something to his girlfriend, and she looked right at me and snickered. It wasn't just cruel, it was deliberate, like they were trying to humiliate me in surround sound. I didn't say a word. Not then. I just stood up slowly, walked back into the house, and sat in my childhood bedroom, still plastered with faded posters and the scent of old books and teenage dreams that never came true. I stared at the walls for hours. I didn't cry. I didn't scream. I just detached. Something in me snapped quietly, like a cord finally giving way under too much pressure. That night, while they all slept off, I packed the little I had, walked out the front door, and didn't look back. No dramatic goodbye. No final speech. Just silence. The next day, I changed my number, canceled my return flight, booked a bus to a city I'd never been to, Portland. I knew no one, had no job lined up, and barely $300 to my name. But it was mine. My start. The first real one. For the first year, I worked night shifts at a 24-hour diner and wrote during the day, short stories, mostly. Some were garbage, some weren't. But the words were mine. For once, I didn't have anyone hovering over my shoulder with comparisons or back-ended advice. I slept on a futon and lived off cereal and coffee. But I was free. Years passed. I poured my entire soul into my writing. Wrote stories about broken families, about people who felt invisible, about finding strength in isolation. I never used real names, but anyone who read between the lines would feel it. The ache, the betrayal, the quiet revenge of becoming someone without them. Eventually, one of my short stories went viral online. It was raw and personal and struck a nerve with people. A publisher reached out. One thing led to another, and at 31, I released my first full-length book. A memoir, though I didn't market it as one. Just a novel, inspired by true events. The book caught fire. Reviews poured in. I did podcasts, interviews, late-night radio spots. People messaged me from all over saying it helped them through dark times. It was surreal. This version of me people now knew was so far removed from the boy sitting at that barbecue, quietly being torn apart. And yet, that night had written itself into every chapter. I never mentioned my family. Not once. But they noticed. Oh, they noticed. Which brings me to a rainy Thursday evening at a local bookstore in Seattle, where I was scheduled to do a signing. The place was buzzing, a full house, the line curling out the door. That's when I saw them, my parents, standing awkwardly near the back, soaked from the rain, clinging to one shared umbrella. My mom's eyes were already red. My dad looked smaller than I remembered. They didn't try to push forward. They just waited. When I finished speaking, I signed copies, took photos, thanked readers one by one. Then I saw them slowly approaching the table. My mom was the first to speak. "Nate," she said softly, like saying my name would erase 9 years of silence. "We miss you. We didn't know you were hurting. We're so proud of you." My dad added, "We read the book. It's beautiful. Painful, but beautiful. We're sorry." They both looked at me, hoping for something. Maybe a hug, maybe tears, maybe a second chance. But I just looked back at them, face calm, voice even, and said, "I think you came here for closure, but I already got mine years ago. The night you laughed about forgetting I existed, that was your goodbye? You just didn't realize it." My mom's lip trembled. She opened her mouth, but I raised a hand gently. "Not angry, just done. You didn't lose me because of one barbecue. You lost me every time you chose to ignore me. Every time you called me lazy while I was struggling. Every time you lifted up my siblings like trophies and treated me like a mistake." That dinner just made it official. My dad's eyes flicked around nervously, probably realizing people were starting to notice the scene. "We just didn't understand you back then. You were so different. You always had your head in the clouds, and we thought if we pushed you harder, you'd grow up." "That wasn't tough love," I replied. "That was cruelty dressed up as parenting. And it wasn't just when I was a kid. It never stopped. You mocked me in front of family like it was entertainment. You erased me while I was still sitting right there." A hush had fallen over the nearby tables. I noticed a woman in the corner, holding a book and pretending to read while clearly listening. Another couple had subtly stopped signing the posters they brought and were just watching. I didn't care. Let them hear. "I didn't come here to make a scene," my mom whispered. "We just wanted to tell you we love you." I let the silence sit between us for a beat. Then I reached down beside my chair, pulled out a copy of the hardcover edition, one of the early prints, and slid it across the table. It was signed already, but this one was special. "Page 213, I said. "Read it when you get home. Really read it. That chapter's called Ghosts with Living Names. It's about the night of the barbecue. It's the only time I ever wrote about you directly. You asked what I did with the pain? I put it there." My mom clutched the book like it was fragile. My dad nodded, eyes misty now. They didn't ask for a photo. They didn't try to hug me again. They just stood there for a moment longer, like they were waiting for the version of me from a decade ago to come back. But he was long gone, and the man sitting in front of them had nothing left to prove. Then they turned and walked out into the rain, the store doors swinging shut behind them. I sat there for a few seconds, letting my heart steady itself. The past had just walked in and tried to rewrite itself, but I didn't let it. I didn't rage, didn't forgive, didn't collapse. I simply told the truth and let it land where it needed to. When the event wrapped up, I packed my things and went back to my hotel. The lights of the city blinked outside my window, but my mind was quiet. No racing thoughts, no echo of my mom's voice calling me a disappointment. Just calm. Later that week, something strange happened. A cousin I hadn't spoken to in years messaged me on Instagram. All it said was, "They're embarrassed. I think they expected you to fall apart. Instead, you became everything they told people you'd never be." I didn't respond. I didn't need to. The message wasn't for me. It was for the version of Nate who used to sit silently at barbecues, laughing along just to fit in. The one who used to beg for scraps of approval. That version didn't exist anymore. But just when I thought the whole chapter was closed, I got an email that made my stomach flip. It was from my younger brother, the golden child. "Hey," it read. "I know we haven't talked in a long time, but Mom and Dad are freaking out about what you said at the signing. They feel like you humiliated them on purpose. They think you plotted this. Dad says you should issue a public apology." I blinked at the screen. A public apology? I scrolled down and saw another line. "I get it, man. I really do. But if you ever want to talk, to me, I'm here." I've started realizing some things too, and I think there's a lot we all ignored. That caught me off guard. I didn't reply right away. I sat with it. Thought about all the nights I watched my brother get praised for existing while I got grilled for trying. Thought about whether people really change, or if they only change when the story stops favoring them. But what he said stuck in my head. I've started realizing some things too. And suddenly, I wasn't just dealing with my parents anymore. There was another player on the board, one I hadn't accounted for. One who'd always been shielded from the truth, but who might now be peeking through the cracks. And part of me wondered, just wondered, what would happen if I opened that door just an inch? I didn't sleep that night. Not because I was upset, but because my mind was spinning. For the first time in years, the idea of reconnecting with anyone from my past didn't make me instantly recoil. My brother's message wasn't groveling, but it wasn't defensive either. It felt neutral, thoughtful, maybe even genuine. But then again, I've been burned before. I waited 3 days before replying. And even then, it was brief. Appreciate the message. Not ready to talk yet, but I see you. He replied within minutes. That's fair. No pressure. Just wanted you to know I'm here when you are. That was it. No push, no guilt trip. And that's what got me thinking. You see, growing up, my younger brother, Ryan, had always been the son they bragged about. Captain of the debate team, early decision at an Ivy League school, handshakes from every uncle at family gatherings. But when I really looked back, I realized something I had never let myself admit. He wasn't always comfortable with it. He just played along. Maybe because he thought it was safer than questioning anything. Maybe because he didn't want to end up like me. Back when we were teens, he used to sneak into my room late at night when our parents were fighting, mostly about money, or me, or whatever disappointed them that week. We'd just sit in silence and listen to the muffled yelling through the vents. He was the only one who ever saw how bad things really got. Maybe he forgot that. Or maybe he didn't. And now, all these years later, he was the first one to reach out. I didn't jump into anything. I stayed focused on my book tour, on interviews and reader letters and emails from people who said the story helped them leave toxic homes or finally start therapy. It was overwhelming in the best way. I had built something solid from the broken pieces. I wasn't about to risk it for nostalgia. But then, about a month later, I got another message. This one wasn't from Ryan. It was from my old high school teacher, Mr. Wallace. Nate, I read the book. Powerful stuff. Didn't realize it was you until halfway through. Your parents came by the school last week, trying to do damage control. Claimed you made everything up. I didn't say anything, but I thought you should know. That email hit me differently. Because it confirmed something I suspected all along. They weren't sorry. They were embarrassed. Not by what they did, but by the fact that the world now knew. I didn't reply to Mr. Wallace, but I sat with that information. And I realized it was time for me to take control of the narrative again. So I planned something. A month later, I announced a surprise second print edition of the book, with a new foreword, something raw, something honest, something personal. It wouldn't name names. I didn't need to. The people who knew would know. In that foreword, I wrote, some wounds don't scar over. They stay open. But healing doesn't mean pretending the knife was never there. Healing means writing the truth anyway. For anyone else who was erased while still standing in the room, this book is yours now. I'm not here to fix my past. I'm here to make sure it never repeats itself. The response was electric. The second print sold out within days. But the backlash came quickly too from the only people who had something to feel guilty about. It started with a letter. A real, handwritten letter, postmarked from my parents' town. Inside, in my mom's cursive, were 2 pages that swung wildly between apology, defensiveness, and thinly veiled threats. She wrote about how my story was hurting the family, how my aunt's church friends had stopped calling, how my cousin didn't get invited to a scholarship panel because of the shame surrounding our name. And at the end, she wrote, you need to call us. We are still your parents. You're not allowed to rewrite the truth. That line, you're not allowed to rewrite the truth. As if they hadn't been the authors of every lie I lived with for over 2 decades. I took a deep breath, and I didn't respond. But then something happened that changed everything. Ryan showed up in person. I was at a small signing event in Austin. Smaller crowd, intimate setting, nothing flashy. Afterward, while chatting with a few readers, I saw a figure in the back of the room, hands in his pockets, shifting awkwardly. He looked older, tired, in a way I recognized. When our eyes met, I knew immediately. He gave a hesitant wave. I didn't wave back. I just stared. He waited until the crowd thinned out before approaching. Hey, he said softly. Didn't want to email this time. I stayed quiet. He continued. I left home 2 weeks ago. Moved in with a friend. I couldn't take it anymore. They've been obsessed with your book. Not because of what's in it, but because they can't control how people see them anymore. They're unraveling. I raised an eyebrow. Still not sure where this was going. I just wanted you to know, he said. You were right. About all of it. And I think I always knew that. I just didn't have the courage to say it. I studied him for a moment, then finally asked, why now? He looked down at the floor. Because I realized that if I didn't leave, I'd end up like them. And I'd rather be the brother who shows up late, then the one who never shows up at all. And for the first time in nearly a decade, I said his name out loud. Ryan. His eyes shot up. I don't know if I forgive you yet, I said, not unkindly. But I hear you. He nodded. That was enough for him. And just as I thought this chapter might be finding a new rhythm, just as the dust seemed to be settling, a journalist from a major publication emailed me. We're doing a feature on family estrangement and reconciliation. We'd love to include your story, especially since your parents have reached out to us with their side. I blinked at the screen. My parents going to the press? I stared at the email for a long time, rereading that last line, especially since your parents have reached out to us with their side. So that was their next move. They couldn't reach me, couldn't guilt-trip me, couldn't shame me into silence. So now they were trying to reclaim the narrative publicly. It wasn't about healing. It was about image, about reputation, about control. And they were about to learn that I wasn't 19 anymore. I wasn't the kid who shrunk into himself every time they spoke over me. I had a voice now, and they had no idea just how loud it had become. I responded to the journalist within the hour. I'll speak, but only if it's live. No edits, no filters, no room for spin. I'll bring receipts, literal ones. She agreed. A week later, the interview aired. It was titled, Forgotten Son, How One Man Turned His Family's Cruelty into a Bestseller and Why He'll Never Go Back. It started with a calm sit-down. The journalist asked questions about my book, my past, my sudden rise in the literary world. Then she asked the real one. Your parents said you've exaggerated, that they were just doing their best, that they're hurt by the way you've portrayed them. Do you regret anything you wrote? I didn't blink. No, I said, because the words they're upset about were the truth. And for every person they're trying to fool now, I've got a lifetime of memories that don't lie. Then I pulled out an old spiral notebook, the one I'd kept hidden in my room from age 12 to 20, filled with journal entries, dates, quotes, verbatim things they'd said. I'd copied down moments they thought I'd forget. But I didn't. Not when my dad told a room full of people I'd never amount to anything. Not when my mom laughed and said she only had 3 kids. Not when I sat there, quiet, because speaking up never made a difference. I read passages from that notebook, and as the camera zoomed in, you could see my hands were steady. My voice never cracked. I wasn't telling a sob story. I was stating facts. I ended the interview with this. Sometimes the most powerful thing you can do is walk away and stay away. Not out of spite, but self-respect. I didn't get here by burning bridges. I got here by surviving the ones they set on fire and blamed me for standing too close to. When the episode aired, the reaction was immediate. Emails flooded in. People from around the world, strangers, shared their own stories of being the forgotten one, the disappointment, the black sheep. Book sales tripled within 2 weeks. My publisher called it a cultural moment. My parents? They vanished from the media cycle almost instantly. No more interviews. No follow-ups. No statements. Turns out, when the spotlight isn't flattering, it gets hot fast. Ryan texted me later that week. They're furious. Said you humiliated them. I told them they did that to themselves a long time ago. I didn't reply. He didn't expect me to. We had spoken again since Austin. Slowly, carefully. I didn't trust easily, but I let the door stay slightly open for him. He never tried to push it wide. Just showed up. Quiet. Present. One night, months later, we sat on a bench outside a coffee shop. Ryan turned to me and said, "You know, they still say they want to make things right." I sipped my drink. "They don't want to make things right," I said. "They want to look right." He nodded. "Yeah, that's what I finally realized, too. I didn't hate them. I didn't wish them harm. I just didn't owe them access to me anymore." And that, I think, was what scared them the most. Because people like them can handle anger. They can even twist guilt to work in their favor. But silence? Distance? Peace? That's what they can't manipulate. They showed up at my next book signing, but not to talk, not to grovel. They stood outside the store, behind the glass, and watched from a distance. I didn't wave. I didn't even turn. I stood beneath a banner that read, #1 bestseller, the son they forgot, smiled at the crowd, and kept signing. And when they finally left, I knew. They'd never show their faces again. Because this time, the world saw me. And this time, I didn't disappear. I didn't find out about my sister's wedding until 3 days after it happened. That's not an exaggeration. No save the date, no invite, no phone call, not even a lazy group text, just silence. Until I opened Instagram and saw a picture of my entire family, my mom, dad, both brothers, all 3 aunts, their husbands, and every cousin I'd ever grown up with, smiling in coordinated outfits, barefoot on a beach in Maui, throwing flower petals into the ocean with a caption that read, "The most magical day of our lives. Welcome to the family, Kevin." I stared at the photo, so long my screen dimmed. I remember because I blinked and it took me a second to realize the phone had gone dark. That photo would be the first of many. They flooded in over the next few hours. Videos of the ceremony, poolside selfies, sunset dinners, drunken karaoke. My older sister, Amelia, looked stunning in her dress. Her new husband, Kevin, was practically glowing. My mom had even worn her hair in the old updo I told her she looked best in. The whole event looked like something out of a luxury destination wedding catalog. And I, Jack, 29, the youngest sibling by a decent stretch, wasn't even a blip in it. I didn't cry. Not right away. I just froze. You know that feeling when your brain tries to rationalize something awful? I started coming up with excuses for them. Maybe it was a super last-minute ceremony. Maybe they thought I wouldn't be able to get time off work. Maybe they tried to call, and it didn't go through. Maybe the invitation got lost in the mail. Maybe. But the captions told another story. Best week ever with the people we love most. Couldn't have asked for a more perfect group. Every single person who mattered to us was there. That last one was from my sister. And that's when the tears came. Not loud sobs or anything dramatic. Just slow, angry drops that I kept wiping away like they weren't real. I wasn't even mad at first. I was hollow. Like someone had erased me from my own family's memory. The next day, I called my mom. She picked up on the second ring, sounding chipper, as if I was just another one of her Facebook friends calling to compliment the dress. "Jack, hey sweetie, did you see the photos?" Wasn't Amelia radiant? I didn't waste time. Why wasn't I invited? There was a pause, long enough that I thought the call dropped. Then she said, "Oh honey, we just assumed you wouldn't be able to afford it." That was it. No apology. No hesitation. Just a casual statement, like she was commenting on the weather. I could feel my pulse in my ears. "You assumed?" "Well, yeah. I mean, you've been so busy with your little startup thing, and with everything being so expensive in Hawaii, we didn't want to pressure you. We figured you'd understand." "I would have figured it out," I said quietly. "You never asked." She let out a breath like I was being difficult. It was all moving so fast. Amelia didn't want to wait another year. And it was mostly just family anyway. Close friends, aunts, uncles, you know. I swallowed hard. "I am family." That silence came again. Then, with the kind of voice you use when you're talking to a toddler who's throwing a tantrum, she said, "Jack, don't take it personally. You're always so sensitive." That was the moment something inside me broke. Not in a fiery, explosive way, but in a quiet, surgical kind of way. Like a switch flipped. I didn't scream. I didn't cry again. I just nodded, even though she couldn't see me. "You're right," I said. She hesitated. "Right about what?" "I couldn't afford it." Then I hung up. And that was the last time I spoke to my family for over a year. The thing is, my mom wasn't completely wrong. At the time, I couldn't afford a trip to Hawaii. Not even close. I'd poured every cent I had into a small tech consulting business I'd started 2 years prior. It was barely breaking even. Some months I had to choose between paying rent and marketing software. But it was my baby, and I believed in it. I just hadn't told my family much about it because they never really took it seriously. To them, if it wasn't a 9 to 5 with benefits, it wasn't a real job. They still thought I worked in IT support, like I did fresh out of college. But that call, that moment, that flip switch, it lit a fire under me that I didn't even know I had. I stopped waiting for their approval. I stopped trying to explain myself. I didn't post on Instagram. Didn't send holiday texts. When my birthday rolled around a few months later and no one reached out, not even a generic HBD, on Facebook, I knew they'd written me off completely. And weirdly, that gave me power. Because while they were drinking piña coladas and posting reels of underwater snorkeling, I was grinding. I took every client I could get. I taught myself how to automate half the business so I could scale faster. I pulled 14-hour days, sleeping on my office floor some nights. I lived off canned soup and black coffee. I built a team, hired smart, fired smarter, and little by little, the numbers started turning in my favor. We landed a big contract with a hotel chain, then another with a travel app, then one with a resort management group that had a portfolio in, ironically, Hawaii. By the time the 1-year anniversary of Amelia's wedding rolled around, My company was netting more in a month than I'd made in the previous year. But I didn't call my mom. I didn't tell my siblings. I didn't post about my success. I just watched from a distance as their lives went on without me. Baby announcements. New cars. Sunday brunches. I wasn't tagged in anything anymore. It was like I'd been quietly erased. But they had no idea what was coming. Because a few months later, a property came up for acquisition. A resort. Mid-sized, oceanfront, recently remodeled. The exact one they'd stayed at for the wedding. And thanks to my new partnerships and the insane leverage I'd built over the last year, I had the chance to make a move that would change everything. That's when the idea hit me. It started as a joke, really. Just a petty daydream during a late-night spreadsheet session. But the more I thought about it, the more it consumed me. I didn't want revenge in the explosive, dramatic sense. I wanted silence. Elegance. I wanted them to feel what I felt, like they were on the outside of something they should have been part of. So I booked the resort. Every room. Every bungalow. Every event space. I told the staff it was for a private event. No press. No social media. Just exclusivity. I planned the guest list meticulously. Friends who supported me. Mentors who believed in me. Colleagues who'd stuck by me when I was broke and invisible. Not one family member made the cut. And as the final confirmations rolled in, I sat in the same chair I'd been in a year ago, staring at my phone. Only this time, I wasn't crying. I was smiling. But then something happened I didn't expect, something that made everything twist just a bit. My sister called, for the first time in a year, and I didn't pick up. I stared at the screen, her name glowing like a ghost from a past life. Amelia. Just that. No emojis. No contact photo anymore. Not since I deleted it. Just her name, sitting there like a test I hadn't studied for. She called again 2 days later. Then once more the following week. No voicemails, no texts. Just quiet calls that rang out, one after another, like the universe nudging me to pay attention. I told myself not to care. I told myself it was nothing. Probably just some passive-aggressive guilt check-in, like Mom used to do. I let it ring out each time. The silence felt good. It felt earned. But then, 3 weeks before the private event at the resort, something slipped. I was on my laptop, reviewing the final logistics with the event planner when an email popped up, subject, "Hey little brother," from a name I hadn't read in over a year. It was Amelia. I didn't open it at first. I hovered, closed my laptop, poured myself some water. Paste. Opened it. "Hey Jack. So, I know this is long overdue. I've been thinking about reaching out for a while now, but honestly, I didn't know what to say. Things got weird after the wedding, and I didn't want to make it worse. I know you probably feel hurt. I would too, but I just want you to know it wasn't personal. We thought you'd say no. Mom said you were super busy and didn't have the money for a trip like that. And you didn't really seem that close to Kevin, so we figured you wouldn't care as much. Anyway, I heard through the grapevine that you're doing really well. That's amazing, Jack. I'm proud of you. I mean it. If you ever want to talk, I'm here. Love, Amelia." I read it 3 times. It wasn't personal. That phrase made something snap in my chest. Like every dismissal I'd swallowed my whole life had been waiting for this exact sentence to bubble back up. I wanted to believe she meant well. But all I could hear behind those words was the same voice that once told me not to be so dramatic when I cried after she read my college application essay out loud to the whole family, like it was a stand-up routine. The same voice that once asked, "Do you ever get tired of making things about you?" Still, I didn't respond. Instead, I pulled up my calendar. 3 weeks. That's how long until the event. Until I'd walk through the doors of the resort they once celebrated at without me and watch the sun set over the ocean with people who chose to be in my life. Not because of shared blood or childhood memories, but because I mattered to them. And then, because the universe has a twisted sense of humor, Mom called. This time I answered. "Jack," she said like we'd just spoken yesterday. "I've been meaning to call you." I said nothing. "So?" She hesitated, clearly not expecting the wall of silence. "Amelia told me she reached out." "That's good, right? You two need to reconnect. I know things got messy." "Messy," I repeated, like I was tasting the word. "Is that what you're calling it?" "Oh honey, come on. It was a wedding. People make mistakes. We didn't think you'd be upset forever." "I wasn't upset," I said. "I was erased." She let out a sharp little laugh, like I was being dramatic again. "Don't be ridiculous. You know we love you. Love me enough to post about how everyone who mattered was there." There was silence. A longer one this time. That was Amelia's caption, she said carefully. You stood right next to her. In every photo. You didn't say anything. More silence. I could almost hear her rearranging her excuses like a Rolodex, flipping through the options. You know, she said finally, this attitude is exactly why we didn't want to pressure you into coming. That was it. That was the moment I realized she didn't see me. Had never really seen me. To her, I was still the sensitive kid who cried too easily and asked too many questions. The weird little brother who liked books more than football and always took things too personally. I'm not upset anymore, I said flatly. I just don't care. Then I hung up. That same night, I sent out the formal invites for my private event. Every envelope sealed with a gold stamp. Every name carefully selected. The guest list was intimate, 30 people. The ones who stood by me when I had nothing. A few clients who turned into friends. My first mentor from college. The landlord who gave me a break when I was 2 months behind. People who never made me feel like a footnote. And just for the poetic symmetry of it all, I sent one last envelope. No invitation inside. Just a photo. Me, standing in front of the resort, smiling with a glass of champagne in hand, the ocean in the background. On the back, I wrote 5 words. Guess who can afford it now? I sent it to my mom's address. I didn't expect a reply, but a few days later, it came. An email this time. No subject line. No greeting. That was cruel, Jack. I don't know what you think you're proving, but it's not classy. Families forgive each other. You've made your point. Let it go. That was the moment I realized this wasn't just about the wedding. It was never just about the wedding. It was about a lifetime of being the afterthought. Like the time I got accepted into an elite summer program in high school, and they all skipped my celebration dinner because Amelia had a new boyfriend to introduce. Or when I broke my collarbone playing rec soccer and Mom said, well, that's what happens when you try to be something you're not. Or every single Christmas where I got the last gift unwrapped. The leftover attention. I didn't hate them for it. Not anymore. Hate is too heavy. But I didn't forgive them either. 2 days before my event, my brother Nate, who hadn't called me in 2 years, texted, Yo man, heard about the big celebration. That's wild. Mind if I come by for a bit? No explanation. No apology. Just a casual, last-minute drop-in like we were college buddies who lost touch. I didn't answer. The next day, I got a DM on Instagram from my cousin Jess. Is this the same resort we stayed at for the wedding? LOL, that's hilarious. Looks so pretty. You there now? That's when I realized something was leaking. Someone I'd invited had shared a post. One photo. Just a sneak peek of the setup. A white canopy on the beach, elegant table settings, soft lighting. By that night, 5 more messages came in. All from relatives who hadn't spoken to me in over a year. Suddenly, I was the hot ticket. Suddenly, everyone remembered I existed. Even Kevin, the guy who married into the family and never said more than, "What's up?" at Thanksgiving, sent me a LinkedIn message. Hey Jack, Amelia mentioned you're throwing some kind of event in Hawaii? That's amazing, bro. We'll actually be on the island that weekend. Would love to catch up if you're around. That was the final straw. Not because he messaged me, but because he used the word bro. We were never bros. And that's when it hit me. They didn't want me. They wanted proximity. To success. To money. To whatever this glow-up version of me was now. But none of them wanted the version of me who slept on his office floor and ate $8 ramen for months while they posted engagement photos and drank cocktails in swim-up bars. The day of the event came faster than I expected. I flew in 2 days early to oversee everything. The resort staff were incredible, helpful, discreet, professional. They understood the assignment. The property was flawless. The flowers, the lights, the music, it was like something out of a movie. The night before the event, I stood alone on the balcony of my suite, watching the waves crash softly against the shore. And for the first time in a long time, I let myself feel the weight of it all. Not the revenge, not the victory, just the quiet ache of what I'd lost. Because despite everything, a small part of me had wanted them to notice, to apologize, to say, "We messed up, Jack. We should have been there." But they never did. They just wanted back in now that it looked fun again. The next morning, just as the first guests were arriving, the front desk called. "There's a woman here," the concierge said. "She says she's your mother." I froze. "She's not on the guest list," they added, "but she says it's important." I felt a dozen emotions at once. Anger, confusion, something dangerously close to hope. "Is she alone?" I asked. A pause. "She's with 2 other people, a man and a woman." Of course. Amelia. And Kevin. They were here. They came. But not for me. They came to crash something they weren't invited to. Something I built with every ounce of pain they left me to carry alone. I took a breath. My heart was pounding. Tell them, I said slowly. This event is for family. And then I hung up. But I hadn't seen the last of them. Because 3 hours later, they tried something I never expected. They didn't take the hint. I knew they wouldn't. Deep down, I think I always knew the word no had never meant much to people like them. People who were used to always being let in, always getting their way. My mom had been steamrolling boundaries since I was old enough to speak. Amelia had turned passive aggression into an art form by middle school. And Kevin? Well, Kevin just did whatever Amelia told him to do, which made him arguably the most dangerous of the three. I thought rejecting them at the front desk would be the end of it. I'd imagine them slinking back to their rental car in embarrassment, maybe booking a flight home a day early, blaming me to each other while they waited in the lounge for their overpriced airport food. But of course not. Because when the event began, when the sun started to dip low on the horizon and the music came on and the laughter swelled across the beach lawn like the tide, my past showed up again. Only this time, it was wearing makeup and sunglasses. They didn't try the front entrance again. No, they went around, walked the perimeter of the resort, probably scoped it out earlier that morning. I was standing near the pool bar, talking to someone from my very first investor meeting, Susan, a retired engineer who took a chance on me when I was pitching software prototypes out of a Starbucks, when I spotted a figure ducking between palm trees near the property line. I stopped mid-sentence. Susan noticed. You okay? I nodded, then turned away slightly, pretending I was looking for someone. But I saw it. Amelia's blonde hair, unmistakable even under a wide-brimmed hat. She was walking quickly, glancing side to side like she was in some sort of amateur heist movie. Kevin followed behind her, holding what looked like a gift bag. I kid you not. A gift bag. And behind him was my mother. Wearing white. White. To my event. I blinked like I was hallucinating. My jaw actually dropped. I'd read stories online about people crashing weddings or parties, showing up in white to be petty, but I never thought I'd see it happen in real time. I wasn't angry. I was done. I handed my drink to Susan and calmly walked toward the concierge. Hey, I said, voice even. We may have a breach of the perimeter. He blinked. A breach? I pointed. The group by the east side palms. None of them are guests. Please escort them off the property. He looked over and stiffened immediately. Absolutely, sir. Within minutes, 2 resort staff, both well-trained and radio-connected, walked calmly toward the invaders. I watched from a distance as they were intercepted mid-sneak. Amelia tried to act surprised. Kevin looked lost. My mom. Well, she folded her arms like she was the victim of a misunderstanding. I saw them arguing. Heard a few words float across the breeze. Family. Miscommunication. Invitation must have been lost. They were grasping. Eventually, they were walked off property, not forcibly, but firmly. And that should have been the end of it. But the real fall didn't come that day. It came the next. Because while I was still glowing from the high of the event, still standing on that pedestal of sweet, silent revenge, I woke up to a different kind of notification. A Facebook post. From my mother. I don't normally air family matters online, but I'm heartbroken today. After everything I've done for my children, being excluded from such an important event has shattered me. I raised my son to be kind, generous, and thoughtful. I never imagined he'd become someone who thinks success is more important than family. If you're reading this, please remember, the way you treat your parents says everything about who you are. The comments were filled with sympathy. Sending hugs, Linda. You're such a good mom. He'll come around. Kids these days have no gratitude. Only 1 or 2 people question the narrative. But they were drowned out. And that's when I felt it, the crash after the high. The weight of the spotlight being flipped back on me. Only this time not as the overlooked brother, but as the villain. And it didn't stop there. Amelia posted next. A carousel of wedding photos. Yes, again, with a caption dripping in condescension. I wasn't going to say anything, but I guess we're sharing now. My brother chose to cut out his entire family for reasons none of us understand. I reached out. I apologized. I tried. But I guess money changes people. I didn't respond. Not online. Not privately. But I read everything. Every tag. Every subtweet. Every passive-aggressive story post. I watched as relatives I hadn't seen since childhood joined the pity parade. I watched old family friends share it like it was some public statement. I watched my name get dragged in a way I never prepared for. And for the first time in a long time, I felt small again. I thought I'd healed. I thought the event, the resort, the moment, that it would erase the years of being overlooked, misunderstood, uninvited. But standing in the aftermath of my own celebration, I realized something I hadn't anticipated. You can't win a war you don't admit you're fighting. Because I wasn't just trying to make a point. I was still trying to be seen. Still chasing the validation I never got at 10 years old when Mom left my science fair early to go pick up Amelia's dress fitting. Still trying to earn a spot at a table that was never set for me. The internet can be cruel. It feeds on emotion. It distorts facts into drama. And within a few days, some of my clients saw the posts. A few reached out awkwardly. One pulled out of a deal, said they didn't want to get involved in family issues. It stung. The event that was supposed to crown my comeback had quietly cost me. I wasn't canceled or anything dramatic. But the shine dimmed. The story shifted. I became the guy who booked a whole resort just to snub his own mother. And for the first time since I'd hung up that phone a year ago, I started to doubt myself. Had I gone too far? Had I lost sight of what I wanted? I stopped posting, paused all interviews, took a step back from the business for a while. My team was capable. They kept things moving, but I was adrift. Some nights, I couldn't sleep. I'd sit on the edge of my bed and stare at the floor, wondering if I'd let revenge turn me into the very person I swore I wasn't. It felt like rock bottom. Not the dramatic, fall from grace kind, but the quiet kind. The kind where you realize success means nothing if you're still carrying old wounds. But then, something changed. It started small. A handwritten letter arrived at my office. From Susan, the woman I'd spoken to at the event. The one who'd once invested in me when all I had was a pitch deck and a dream. Jack, I don't know what's going on with your family, and frankly, it's none of my business. But I do know this. That event was filled with joy, generosity, and integrity. Everyone there was there for the right reasons. You brought good people together. You honored the ones who lifted you up. That matters more than online noise. Don't let anyone rewrite your story. You know who you are. Susan, I read it 3 times. And then I cried. Not because I was sad, but because for the first time in weeks, I felt anchored. Like someone saw the version of me I was trying so hard to protect. The version that wasn't vindictive or cruel. Just tired. Just trying to heal in the only way I knew how. That letter pulled me out. I got back to work. But not in the hustle, grind, scale at all costs way I had before. I slowed down. I started doing office hours again. Free consulting for startups, just getting off the ground. I met with founders who reminded me of me, wide-eyed and scared and scrappy. I shared the mistakes I'd made. I helped people without expecting anything in return. And weirdly, that healed me more than any party ever could. I restructured the company, gave my team more equity, hired a head of people, started a mentorship program through our platform. I stopped caring about the headlines and started caring about the legacy. And something incredible happened. The narrative changed. Not because I forced it, but because I lived differently. People saw. Clients came back. Some even apologized. And one day, quietly, without drama, Amelia deleted her post. Then Mom's disappeared too. No explanations. No messages. Just gone. But I didn't reach out. Because by then, I didn't need to anymore. I wasn't climbing a ladder to their approval anymore. I was building a life without their weight on my shoulders. And then, about 6 months after the event, just as I was preparing to speak at a small tech summit in San Diego, I got a call from a number I hadn't seen in over a decade. Aunt Denise. The only relative who hadn't posted anything during the Facebook firestorm. I hesitated, then picked up. Her voice was warm, unchanged. Jack, she said, I know I might be overstepping, but there's something you should probably know. I sat down slowly, and what she said next made my stomach drop. Because the betrayal that started with a wedding wasn't the only one. And the thing she told me? It rewrote everything I thought I understood about my family. I hadn't spoken to Aunt Denise in years. She was the quiet one in the family. The one who didn't pick sides, didn't raise her voice, didn't insert herself unless absolutely necessary. When my parents fought, she'd be the one making sure the kids were in another room with snacks. She was Amelia's godmother, my mom's younger sister, and had lived 2 states away for most of my life. In family photos, she was always in the back, smiling, never spotlighted. And yet, somehow, It was her voice that finally cracked the surface of something I hadn't even realized was still buried. "Jack," she said again, gently, "are you sitting down?" "I am now." There was a pause. She breathed in like she wasn't sure whether to keep going. "I should have told you this a long time ago," she said, "but I didn't want to cause drama. And honestly, I wasn't sure if you even wanted to hear it. But after everything that's happened, I just can't keep it to myself anymore." My chest tightened. "What is it?" "It's about your inheritance," she said. I blinked. "My what?" "From Grandpa Harold. Your mom and Amelia told everyone he didn't leave you anything, that he thought you were too young and irresponsible with money. But that's not true, Jack. That's not true at all." I stood up so fast I nearly knocked over the chair. "I was at the reading of the will," Denise continued, her voice slow, careful. "Your mom didn't want me there, but I insisted. I'd help take care of Harold in his final months. He was clear about what he wanted. He left each of you grandkids something. He set aside $100,000 each. You, Amelia, and Nate. And he left the remaining assets, his house, the stocks, the vintage car collection, to be divided evenly between his children, your mom, Uncle Dave, and me." "Okay," I said, still trying to catch up. "But later that year," she continued, "your mom told everyone you refused the money, that you thought it was blood money or something. She said you'd gotten into some crypto thing and didn't need it. She even claimed you signed a form to waive the inheritance." My mouth went dry. "I asked her to show me the document," Denise said. "She got angry, said I was accusing her of lying. After that, I didn't push again. I regret that now." My mind was spinning. Why would they lie about that? "I think it's because Amelia was struggling financially at the time," Denise said. "And your mom? Well, you know how she's always tried to keep up appearances. I wouldn't be surprised if they redirected your share to help pay for Amelia's grad school. Or maybe Kevin's business loans. Who knows?" I sat down again, slowly this time. "I didn't have proof," Denise said, "but I always suspected something wasn't right. And then, when I saw what they posted after your event, the guilt tripping, the gaslighting, I couldn't stay quiet anymore. I didn't speak. I couldn't. I was too busy replaying the last decade of my life through a new filter. All those years I struggled, working 2 jobs out of college, sleeping on couches, skipping meals to keep the lights on. All those humiliating family dinners where they made jokes about me being the broke genius, while Amelia and Nate were praised for their stable paths. And all along, I wasn't broke. I'd been robbed. By my own family." I managed to whisper, "Thank you for telling me." There was another pause. Then she said something that changed everything. "I have a copy of the will." I stood up again. "It's in my storage," she said. "I made a copy the day of the reading, just in case. I can overnight it to you. And if you ever decide to do something about it, I'll back you up." I don't know how long I sat there after we hung up. Time stopped matching. My mind raced through memories like a Rolodex on fire. The forgotten birthdays. The silent treatment. The Instagram captions that said everything without saying my name. I'd spent a year building myself up after they cut me out. I thought I'd moved on. But this wasn't emotional neglect. This was theft. And now, for the first time, I had leverage. The will arrived 2 days later. Certified mail. Inside was a yellowing envelope stamped with the estate lawyer's firm, a notarized copy of Harold's final wishes, and a post-it note from Aunt Denise. "You don't owe them kindness. D." I read the will 4 times. There it was in plain black ink. "To my grandson Jack, I leave $100,000 to be held in trust until his 25th birthday. No caveats. No disclaimers. Nothing about rejection. And I had never seen that money. Not a single cent. I spent the rest of the day pulling old bank statements, digging through email archives, even contacting the estate lawyer's office. The firm had since merged with another, but the senior paralegal still had access to digital records. After verifying my identity, he confirmed it. The funds were dispersed. Per signed authorization, Jack Wilson's portion was redirected into a family account for administrative distribution, as permitted by his assigned trustee at the time, his legal guardian, Linda Wilson. My mother. She was my trustee when I was 25, and she'd stolen $100,000 from me. Suddenly, everything came into sharp focus. The casual way she dismissed me. The assumption that I couldn't afford a trip to Hawaii. The tight smiles whenever I brought up money at family gatherings. Amelia's always updated wardrobe. Kevin's magically expanding startup, despite having no revenue. They didn't forget about me. They cashed me in. And now, I had the receipts. But I didn't want to just call them out. That would be too easy. I wanted to do this right. With elegance. With proof. With silence so loud they'd hear it echo for years. And that meant planning. First, I called a lawyer. Not just any lawyer. A bulldog, a white-collar fraud specialist who used to work in federal prosecution before starting her own practice. Her name was Carla Ortiz, and she didn't play games. After laying out everything I had, she sat back in her chair and said, "Jack, this isn't just inheritance fraud. It's fiduciary misconduct. Your mother was a trustee. She had a legal obligation to act in your best interest. Redirecting that money, without your knowledge or consent, is a violation of state and federal trust laws." My heart pounded. "So what does that mean?" "It means," she said with a smile, "you have options." She outlined a strategy that was brutal in its precision. Civil litigation. File a suit for the full amount plus damages. Mediation demand. Before trial, offer to settle privately, but with terms that would sting far more than money. Public pressure. If they resisted, leak the story to financial justice blogs. Use the documentation, the paper trail, the notarized will. Let the court of public opinion speak. And if they get nasty? I asked. Carla grinned. "We get nastier. You're not a kid anymore, Jack." And they messed with the wrong adult. But legal action wasn't my only play. I started contacting others who'd been burned or manipulated by them. Quiet conversations with cousins, family friends, even an old neighbor who once lent Amelia a large sum for wedding prep and never got repaid. I wasn't assembling a mob. I was building a network. Of witnesses. Of stories. Of people who were ready to speak when the time came. And then I did something that surprised even me. I booked a table at Amelia's favorite brunch spot, the trendy rooftop cafe she posted about every other week, and invited her. Not to fight, not to scream, but to watch her lie to my face. And when she did, I'd know exactly how far she'd go. The day of the brunch, she arrived 10 minutes late, wearing oversized sunglasses and a blazer 2 sizes too tight. "Jack," she said, voice sugar-coated. "I wasn't sure you'd show." I smiled. "I'm full of surprises lately." We made small talk. Ordered overpriced lattes. She asked if I was seeing anyone, in that nosy way where she was really asking how stable I was. Then, casually, I dropped the hammer. "I've been thinking about Grandpa Harold lately," I said. She froze just slightly. "Oh, yeah," I said, stirring my drink. "Funny thing, I recently saw a copy of his will." She blinked. "You did?" It said he left me $100,000. Isn't that wild?" She smiled nervously. "Huh, that doesn't sound right." "Mom said." I know what Mom said. I cut in, voice still calm. But she lied. Her lips parted, but no words came. I leaned in just slightly. "Here's what's going to happen, Amelia. I'm going to give Mom a chance to make this right. One chance. And if she doesn't, well, I have a very good lawyer. And a very public platform." "You wouldn't," she whispered. "Try me." She reached for her water, hands trembling. "Jack, it was Mom's call." "I didn't. You benefited from it." Silence. I stood up, tossed a 20 on the table. "You always told me I was too sensitive," I said. "Turns out, I was just paying attention." As I walked out, I didn't look back. Because this time, I didn't need to see her face to know she'd cracked. This was no longer about proving my worth. It was about reclaiming what was mine. And by the time I was finished, they'd understand exactly what that meant. I gave my mother 7 days. 7 days to come clean, to acknowledge what she'd done, to return what was mine. No theatrics, no grand speeches, just an email. I kept it short. Subject: the trust. Mom, I know everything. I have a copy of Grandpa Harold's will, the estate documents, and records showing you redirected my inheritance without my knowledge or consent. You were my legal trustee when I turned 25, which makes this a clear breach of fiduciary duty. I am offering you the opportunity to resolve this quietly and privately. You have 7 days to return the full $100,000, plus a written admission of what you did and who else was involved. If you refuse, I will pursue legal action and make the matter public. Consider this your only chance. Jack." She didn't respond. Not after 1 day, or 2. Not after 5. Not even after I got a read receipt on day 6. I knew she saw it. She just didn't believe I'd follow through. In her mind, I was still that soft, sensitive boy who cried too easily and forgave too quickly. She didn't know the man I'd become. On the morning of the 8th day, my lawyer Carla filed the suit. The paperwork was flawless, every document, every signature, every violation clearly outlined. We filed for full restitution, punitive damages, and fraud. And just as Carla promised, we also sent a press tip to a mid-sized financial blog that covered estate fraud and family betrayal stories. It wasn't a huge outlet, but it had a loyal readership and just enough social media traction to matter. The blog ran the story within a week. Tech founder alleges inheritance fraud by family, with documents to prove it. The headline wasn't bombastic. It didn't name names, but it linked to court records. It mentioned a prominent wedding in Hawaii and a recent private resort event that had stirred social media speculation. Within 48 hours, the story had been shared over 20,000 times. It was on Twitter, LinkedIn, Reddit. The comments were ruthless. Imagine stealing from your own kid. Mom of the Year, /S. This is why I keep my family out of my finances. He booked the same resort they used for the wedding? That's the level of petty I aspire to. I watched silently as the tide shifted. And then the phone started ringing. Amelia called first. I ignored it. Then Kevin. Then Nate. Then Mom. She left a voicemail this time. Jack. I don't even know what to say. This is humiliating. You didn't have to do it this way. You didn't have to go nuclear. We could have talked. Please call me back. I didn't. Because talking was always on their terms. Now it was on mine. Carla received their response through an attorney representing both Amelia and my mother. They tried to argue the funds had been redirected with good intent and that I had benefited indirectly through family expenses. Carla smiled when she read that. Good. Let them say that in court. But just before the first mediation hearing, something unexpected happened. A whistleblower came forward. Turns out, my mother hadn't just stolen my inheritance. She had a pattern. The neighbor I spoke with, the one who said Amelia borrowed money years ago, had documents proving the loan was orchestrated through my mom. A $20,000 transfer labeled bridal support, never repaid. Another cousin, Melissa, reached out after seeing the article. She was 19 when Grandpa Harold passed and always believed she wasn't included in the will because of bad grades and being too immature, as my mother once told her. When I showed her the will, her name wasn't on it. But Melissa's father, my Uncle Dave, had left her a private trust. When Melissa confronted my mom, she got silence. When she hired a lawyer, she found out that trust was also redirected during probate. My mother had her fingerprints all over the paperwork. It was a pattern. Control, manipulation, erasure. And now it was unraveling. Within 2 months, the civil case against my mother and Amelia had expanded. Carla worked like a machine, coordinating witness statements, securing depositions, compiling a mountain of evidence so thick it broke 3 manila folders in her office. And while the legal case churned through its stages, the court of public opinion did its part too. My mom, who once posted Sunday gratitude updates and motivational quotes about motherhood, went dark on social media. Her Facebook page vanished. Amelia's Instagram, once a polished grid of curated perfection, was wiped clean of comments. Kevin deactivated entirely. The fallout reached further than I expected. Apparently, Kevin's startup had been banking on a round of angel funding that quietly disappeared after the blog post made rounds. 2 investors backed out. One firm emailed them directly, stating they couldn't move forward with a brand associated with unresolved legal allegations. Meanwhile, my company? We surged. The attention, though unplanned, had brought visibility to our consulting platform, and small businesses flooded in, resonating with the story of a founder who pulled himself up after family betrayal. But revenge isn't about business growth or social media karma. It's about the moment they finally see you. And that moment came during the mediation hearing. We met in a glass-walled conference room in a downtown high-rise. My mother sat on one side, flanked by Amelia and 2 tight-lipped attorneys. I sat opposite them with Carla and my financial advisor. There were no cameras, no crowd, just fluorescent lighting and a pitcher of water nobody touched. The mediator, a calm woman in her 60s, opened with protocol, asked if we were willing to find a peaceful and confidential resolution. I said yes. So did my mother. But then she looked at me, and for the first time in years, her mask cracked. I never meant to hurt you, she said, voice quiet. You were always so sensitive, Jack. I didn't think you'd understand what the family needed. Carla spoke before I could. What the family needed was not your legal right to decide. My mother tried to speak again, but I raised a hand gently. I wanted to say it myself. You always thought I was soft, I said, looking her in the eye. But I wasn't. I was hopeful. I believed you would choose me, just once. And every time you didn't. I blamed myself. I thought I wasn't worth the effort. Amelia looked away. Kevin didn't show. I continued. But now I know I was just inconvenient. Someone who didn't fit the image you were trying to present. So you cut me out of the wedding. You cut me out of the will. And when I succeeded without you, you tried to crash my life like it was a party you were entitled to. I took a breath. I don't need an apology. I don't need closure. I need accountability. You stole from me. And you used that money to elevate the daughter you actually cared about. So here's the offer. I slid the paper across the table. Carla explained it. Full repayment of the $100,000 plus $50,000 in damages. A written public acknowledgement of wrongdoing. No excuses, no spin. And a signed, notarized document severing all financial claims or obligations between us. No more manipulations. No more guilt. No more calls. Just clean separation. They tried to negotiate. Carla shut it down. And after another week of silence, they accepted. The funds arrived in escrow. The statement was posted online, on an unassuming blog, signed by Linda Wilson and Amelia Larson. No apology, just a confirmation that a financial oversight has been resolved. But I didn't care about the wording. I cared that it was over. It's been a year since that day. I haven't spoken to them since. They send cards on my birthday now. I don't open them. I pass them to my assistant, who files them in a drawer marked personal archive. It's full of envelopes with handwriting I don't recognize anymore. I bought a house overlooking the ocean. Quiet. Private. Filled with light and books and friends who show up without needing to be asked. I still talk to Aunt Denise once a week. Sometimes Melissa joins. She's doing great, by the way. Studying to become a paralegal. And me? I'm still building. Still healing. But lighter now. No more chasing invitations that were never meant for me. No more proving myself to people who never saw me to begin with. Just the freedom to live, fully and unashamed. And sometimes, when I walk past the mirror, I catch a glimpse of that kid who used to wonder if he'd ever be enough. I smile at him. And I say, we made it.